People like you are labeled parasites. My brother's accusation pierced the air as I stood before him, his wife, and our mother. The weight of their condemnation bore down on me, a burden I could no longer bear. We're going to be living together from now on, so can you leave? Those words echoed in my mind, igniting a fury I could no longer suppress. I too am flawed, imperfect in my own right. Yet their unkindness only fueled my resolve. No longer will I endure their scorn silently. It's time they realized the mistake of underestimating me. With determination as my guide, I plotted to confront my brother and mother head-on. My name is Jessica, a 37-year-old office worker. 3 years have passed since my father's battle with cancer ended, leaving behind a final plea for me to care for our mother. It was this solemn promise that drew me back to the family home. But instead of gratitude, all I received were endless demands, as if my sacrifices were expected, not appreciated. I'm heading out to grab dinner with the neighbors. Can you spare some cash? She casually tossed the request my way. Make sure you have some money ready for tomorrow. It's my friend's birthday, and I need to get a gift. Her demands seemed endless. Our vacuum cleaner is ancient. We need a new one, the latest model, she insisted, adding yet another item to the list. Each demand felt like a weight pressing down on me, her temper flaring if I dared to object. Reluctantly, I found myself acquiescing to her desires. Managing the constant stream of requests became a chore in itself. To streamline the process, I made her an authorized user on a separate account, transferring a lump sum to cover her expenses. As a single office worker in my later years, I've dedicated countless hours to my career, resulting in a substantial income. Additionally, I've wisely invested in stocks over the years, building a significant nest egg. However, these details are kept from my mother, a habitual spender whose tendencies would surely drain my savings. Yet for now, her frivolous habits aren't a pressing concern. Unbeknownst to her, I diligently save while she continues to splurge. Our monthly expenses tally around $4,000, largely due to her extravagance. I recognize the wastefulness of our situation, but altering it proves daunting. I'm not prepared to sever ties with my mother, despite the financial strain. Conflicting emotions towards familial duty cloud my judgment. Is valuing family a facade or simply a sign of vulnerability? The driving force behind my continued existence in this distorted reality is the pledge I made to my father. He was my beacon of integrity, hardworking, compassionate, and forthright. From a young age, I revered him, striving to emulate his exemplary character. Following his sage advice, start early, reap the rewards, I began stashing away funds during my student days, laying the groundwork for future investments. Even upon entering the workforce, I remained steadfast in my savings pursuits, eventually amassing enough capital to venture into the world of investments. Throughout this journey, I absorbed invaluable lessons on financial literacy, a legacy passed down from my father. Armed with knowledge, I navigated the complexities of investment with relative ease, reaping profits and avoiding major pitfalls. Similarly, I mirrored my father's work ethic, seeking his counsel whenever I encountered professional challenges. In the early years of my career, post-work drinks with my father became a cherished tradition, providing a sanctuary for candid discussions away from the tensions that sometimes brewed at home. While my mother's presence occasionally injected discord into our conversations, those moments shared with my father offered solace and clarity amidst life's tumult. Under my father's guidance, I flourished in my career, finding both success and a newfound sense of self-assurance. My passion for my work deepened, feeling a profound dedication to my professional pursuits. Despite remaining single, I harbored no regrets about prioritizing my career. Life unfolded in a familiar rhythm. While my mother's extravagant tendencies remained a concern, I chose to focus on my work, allowing her the freedom to indulge in her habits. Yet, amidst the demands of my job, my mother insisted on assigning household tasks, blurring the lines between work and home life. Determined to maintain equilibrium, I endeavored to balance both spheres of responsibility. Over time, I honed my domestic skills, mastering chores, and even refining my culinary talents. I viewed these endeavors optimistically, imagining they might one day serve me well in marriage. Nevertheless, the weight of my mother's expectations grew burdensome. I sensed the need to break free from the confines of this suffocating existence, yearning for a life unencumbered by her demands. Amidst the chaos of my daily life, the presence of my older brother and his wife only served to compound my troubles. David, my elder by 2 years, and his wife Lily, who coincidentally shares my age, began frequenting our family home more often. While their visits weren't inherently problematic historically, David and I never saw eye to eye. Our personalities clashed relentlessly. I embodied the conservative and prudent traits inherited from our father, while David mirrored our mother's impulsive and carefree nature. Since childhood, David's approach to finances mirrored his personality. He spent recklessly, devoid of any foresight or planning, living purely for the present moment. Yet despite his financial missteps, he possessed a cunning charm, adept at winning our mother's favor whenever he found himself in need of funds. "Mom, I truly appreciate all your hard work and dedication to keeping our household running smoothly," David would croon, effortlessly weaving his way into her good graces. "I promise to lend a hand with chores next time." With honeyed words, he effortlessly manipulated her, securing whatever his heart desired. Not only was David adept at charming our mother, but he also excelled in sports, particularly soccer, where his skills earned him admiration from the community. To our mother, David was the epitome of pride, a son whose accomplishments reflected positively on her. Basking in his accolades felt akin to receiving praise herself. Thus, it became routine for her to indulge his every whim, showering him with affection and gifts. In contrast, my strengths lay in academia, lacking the prowess displayed by my brother in sports. Consequently, from my mother's perspective, there was little cause for celebration in my endeavors. I appeared unremarkable, often overshadowed by David's achievements. In the eyes of our neighbors, I was simply known as David's sister. This dynamic fueled my mother's favoritism towards him, leaving me feeling overlooked and undervalued. Moreover, my close bond with our father likely exacerbated her preference for David. Despite our father's attempts at impartiality, my mother's partiality only deepened David's arrogance and hostility towards me. Our strained relationship only served to further entrench my mother's allegiance to him, perpetuating the cycle of favoritism and resentment. "Jessica, move. You're blocking the TV." "Why should I? I was here first. The anime I've been waiting for is about to start. Move from that spot on the couch." "What? You've recorded that anime. You can watch it later. I want to watch it live now. Just move." David's self-centeredness was a common occurrence, his desires always taking precedence. Despite the blatant unfairness of his demands, our mother consistently sided with him. Even in moments of conflict or disagreement, she remained steadfast in her support of David. "What are you doing, Jessica? David's show is starting, so move and let him watch." "But I was watching something." "Quit being selfish and let him watch. You go back to your room, you're just in the way." Mother's scolding reverberated through the air, her tone sharp and unyielding. Left with no recourse, I retreated to the solace of my room, while David claimed the couch without a hint of remorse. As if to underscore our favoritism, Mother returned with snacks and juice exclusively for David, disregarding my presence entirely. In the absence of our father, such partiality towards David only intensified, leaving me feeling increasingly alienated. Growing up amidst this dynamic, it was only natural for me to distance myself from David. As we transitioned into adulthood, my first encounter with David's wife, Lily, left an indelible impression. "So, you're Jessica, David's sister," she remarked, her words dripping with disdain. "You're every bit as plain and unfashionable as David described you. It's no wonder you lack any charm." I was rendered speechless, the sting of Lily's words cutting deep during what should have been a joyous family gathering. While such comments might have warranted reprimand from other family members, David and Lily appeared to revel in their cruelty, leaving me with an instant aversion towards Lily. Her disdainful remarks became a recurring theme, tarnishing even the most cherished family gatherings from New Year's celebrations to Independence Day. "Jessica, we're the same age, yet here you are, still single. Have you ever even had a boyfriend?" Lily's taunts echoed through the room, amplified by David's chuckles of agreement. "No man would ever consider someone as ordinary as you. Jessica's always been devoid of worth, with nothing to offer." They jeered in unison, their words a harsh reminder of their disdain for me. In my father's absence, David and his wife seized the opportunity to demean me, with my mother offering no defense, only joining in their laughter. Consequently, every family gathering at our parents' home became an ordeal for me. Several years ago, when David was transferred for work, the frequency of these uncomfortable gatherings diminished, offering me a semblance of peace. However, his recent return brought back the unwelcome intrusion. Regardless of the season, David and his wife now visit every weekend, disrupting my routine and exacerbating the tension. You're still as unremarkable as ever, aren't you? Living at home at your age. It's simply unacceptable. Did you know they call women like you parasite singles? It's embarrassing to have someone like you as my sister-in-law. Their mocking words only adding insult to injury. David and Lily's harsh words strike a chord of truth within me. It's undeniably embarrassing. As the one who financially supports my mother's lifestyle, I find solace by retreating to my room whenever they belittle me. While they don't actively seek my company, I can't help but notice their outings with my mother. During these occasions, I hastily prepare and consume my meal before retreating to the sanctuary of my room, where I can work without much interaction with them. Yet the frequency of their visits only seems to increase with time, and each time, my mother treats them to lavish meals. Perusing the credit card statements, I'm taken aback by the frequency of their visits to upscale wine bars and barbecue restaurants. Moreover, I can't ignore the fact that most of the designer clothing they flaunt is purchased by my mother. It's a perplexing situation. My mother showers them with gifts and treats, and they accept it as their entitlement. The disparity between their indulgence and my own frugality weighs heavily on my mind. Finally reaching the end of my patience, I mustered the courage to confront my mother about her excessive indulgence towards David and Lily. Mom, you're spoiling David and Lily too much with all these fancy dinners. They both have jobs. Why don't you let them pitch in sometimes? My words ignited a fiery reaction from my mother, her face flushing with anger. Who do you think you are, telling me how to spend my money? How I treat David and Lily is none of your concern. Have you forgotten the favor of allowing you to live under this roof? Her words struck me like a blow, leaving me stunned by her audacity. It was perplexing how she could disregard all I've done for her, seemingly forgetting my contributions to our household. The only reason I remain in my childhood home is out of respect for the promise I made to my father, not out of any desire to be with her. It appeared that Mother had shared our recent disagreement with David and Lily as they arrived at the house a few days later with stern words. Jessica, it's time to face reality. The only reason you're still here is because of Mom's kindness. How could you betray her like this? People like you are nothing but parasites, Jessica. It's time for you to leave this house. Excuse me. You heard us correctly. We're going to be living here with Mom from now on. So, could you please make arrangements to leave? With a heavy burden weighing on my shoulders, the trio launched into a tirade against me. My patience waned as their words cut deeper. I'm no saint. There's no reason for me to continue being kind to people who treat me like this. It's too late for them to realize the error of their ways. In that moment, a plan for retribution formed in my mind against David, Lily, and Mother. I understand. If my leaving brings you satisfaction, then so be it. The couple's malicious grins only fueled my resolve. Remember your promise. If you're still here when we return, we won't hesitate to evict you. With determination coursing through me, I bid farewell to the house. Let's start anew, Mom. Yes, I'm thrilled. It'll be wonderful living with David and Lily. What a joy it will be. As they gleefully discussed their future, I retreated to my room, immediately setting out to find a new home. Opting for practicality over extravagance, I set out for an affordable apartment near my workplace, prioritizing safety and convenience. With the logistics swiftly arranged, I notified Mother of my impending move. In response, she wasted no time informing David and Lily. A week later, my relocation was complete, and it became clear that Mother's allegiance lay elsewhere. She embarked on a vacation with the couple, only returning in time for David and Lily's move into our family home. Soon after, Mother's voice crackled through the phone, laced with shock and anger. Jessica, what's going on? Where are all the furniture and appliances? Well, I bought them with my own money, so I took them with me, I replied calmly. Don't be absurd. I bought those with my money. Remember, you asked me to replace them, and I did. I paid for everything. Mother's frustration was palpable. You're mistaken. I've been using my own credit card for purchases, I countered. It seemed Mother had conveniently forgotten that the card she used was provided by me. But I let her accusations roll off me, ending the call casually. Eventually, Mother attempted to replace the missing items, only to find the bank account linked to her credit card had been emptied. A few days later, I received a call from David. Mom's credit card isn't working. What's going on? You're behind this, aren't you? David's accusatory tone sliced through the air, revealing his keen intuition. I simply took necessary measures, I replied, trying to frame my actions in a more positive light. His anger simmered beneath his words. You've been footing the bills all this time. Did you realize that every luxury, from fine wines to designer clothes, was funded by the sister you've belittled? So, unknowingly, we've been living off your generosity. David's realization hung heavy in the air. Exactly. How does it feel, David, to know your lifestyle was bankrolled by the sister you ridiculed? You two seem quite proud. Must be a blow to your ego, I remarked, deliberately provoking them. David appeared flustered, struggling to find a retort amidst his frustration. Why the hell would you do this? He finally exclaimed, his irritation palpable. Lily, who had been listening in, interjected with a pointed question. Why didn't you inform us earlier? Mom, does this mean you have no money left? Mother, caught off guard by Lily's accusation, stammered in response. I always assumed there was a substantial inheritance from your father. I'm sorry. While our father did leave behind some inheritance, Mother's extravagant spending habits depleted much of it, leaving little for us. It was this realization that prompted him to advise me to build my own wealth. I trust you'll find a solution. I've only followed your guidance, I asserted. Jessica, wait, we're not finished yet, David protested, but I refused to entertain further discussion, cutting ties with him, Lily, and Mother. Ignoring their pleas for reconciliation, I blocked their numbers. Subsequently, I received emails from both Mother and David, each pleading for assistance. Through these messages, a startling revelation emerged. David had resigned from his job under the mistaken assumption that he could live off our presumed family wealth. It was clear that his lavish lifestyle had left him with unrealistic expectations. Currently, they struggle to make ends meet with part-time jobs, their past extravagance now a distant memory. Their constant disputes only serve to underscore the stark contrast between their previous lifestyle and their current reality. Despite their pleas to move in with me, I remain steadfast in my decision to sever ties, choosing to ignore their messages and focus on my own path. Currently, I revel in the tranquility of my solitary existence. I've severed ties with David and Mother, content in the knowledge that I've honored my father's wishes. Focused on my career and financial goals, I am determined to expand my wealth through diligent work and strategic investments. As I steadily build my assets, I also intend to gradually delve into the realms of love and companionship, open to the possibilities of romance and marriage.
I'm Catherine, and I grew up in what you might call a big family. Dad was hell-bent on having a son. So, they kept trying, over and over. Mom got pregnant again and again until the doctors finally put their foot down. No more, they said. It's too risky. That's when Mom and Dad finally threw in the towel on their dream of a boy. Being the oldest, I got stuck with a lot of the grunt work. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sisters, but sometimes it felt like I was more of a parent than a sibling. I had to grow up fast, you know? While other kids were out playing, I was changing diapers, doing laundry, and helping Mom with everything around the house. Things really changed when my youngest sister was born. It was like Mom and Dad suddenly remembered they were parents. They showered her with attention, bought her the best toys, signed her up for every club and activity under the sun. Whatever she wanted, she got. One day, when I was about 14, I overheard Mom talking on the phone. I just don't have time for the older girls anymore, she said. Catherine's handling it, though. She's such a good helper. Helper, that's what I was reduced to. Not a daughter, not even a sister. Just a helper. But I had a secret that kept me going. My grandmother, Mom's mother. They'd had some big falling out years ago and hadn't spoken since. But I'd managed to find her number, and we'd been talking in secret. As I got older, I started to dream about college. I wanted more for myself than just being the family babysitter. But when I graduated high school, Mom and Dad dropped a bombshell on me. There's no money for your education, Catherine, Dad said, not even looking me in the eye. You need to get a job and help out financially. We need to save for your sister's education. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling trapped and hopeless. But then I remembered my secret weapon, Grandma. The next day, I called her, spilling out everything between sobs. "Don't you worry, sweetheart," she said, her voice firm and determined. "I'll pay for your college. You deserve a chance at a better life." And just like that, a whole new world opened up for me. I applied to colleges in other cities, dreaming of a fresh start. When I got accepted to study economics, I was over the moon. But my parents, they didn't see it that way. "You're abandoning your family," Mom accused, her eyes cold. "After everything we've done for you." Done for me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've been raising your kids since I was a kid myself." "Get out," Dad said, his voice low and angry. "If you're going, then go. But don't expect any support from us." I packed my bags that night, my sisters watching with tear-filled eyes. "Don't go, Kathy," they pleaded. "I have to," I told them, hugging each one tight. "But I'll always be here for you. Always." As I walked out the door, I heard Dad's voice behind me. "Girls, you are not to have any contact with Catherine. Do you understand?" As I settled into college life, I felt like I could finally breathe. The campus was bustling with energy, and for once, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. But even as I embraced this new chapter, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. I missed my sisters fiercely. Despite my parents' ban, I couldn't bear the thought of completely cutting ties with them. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart raced as I answered. "Kathy?" It was my second youngest sister's voice, barely above a whisper. "Emily? Is that you?" I could hardly contain my excitement. "Yeah, it's me. I'm using my friend's phone. Mom and Dad can't know." We talked for hours that night, catching up on everything. Emily told me how things had changed at home, how our parents were even stricter now, and how much they all missed me. "Even Sarah?" I asked, referring to our youngest sister. There was a pause on the other end. "Sarah, she's different, Kathy. She told Mom and Dad about us calling you. They took our phones away, but don't worry, we'll find ways to keep in touch. We love you, Kathy." Those secret calls became my lifeline. My sisters, except for Sarah, would use their friends' phones to reach out to me. We'd talk about their lives, their dreams, and I'd share stories about college. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was something. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies. Economics fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in my classes. My professors took notice, and soon I was being recommended for internships and special projects. As my college years flew by, I couldn't help but think about my family back home. I'd hear snippets from my sisters about how Sarah was still the golden child, how she was in all these clubs and always the center of attention. Mom and Dad are talking about sending her to some fancy private school, my sister Jessica told me during one of our secret calls. "What about you and Emily?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Oh, you know," Jessica said, trying to sound nonchalant. "We'll probably just go to the local high school. It's fine, really." But I knew it wasn't fine. I knew how it felt to be overlooked, to be treated like you didn't matter as much. It broke my heart that my sisters were going through the same thing. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I'd done well in college, thanks in no small part to my grandmother's support. She'd been my rock through it all, always there with a kind word or a bit of advice when I needed it. "I'm so proud of you, Catherine," she told me over the phone one night. "You've overcome so much. Your grandfather would have been proud too." The day of my graduation, I scanned the crowd, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents and sisters would be there. But they weren't. The only familiar face in the sea of people was my grandmother's, beaming with pride. Fresh out of college, I hit the ground running. The job was challenging, but I thrived on it. Months flew by, and I settled into a routine. Work, gym, home, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine. I was building my own life, on my own terms. Then came the company's annual corporate party. I almost didn't go, large gatherings still made me a bit uncomfortable. But my colleague, Jen, insisted. "Come on, Catherine," she pleaded. "It'll be fun. Plus, I heard some bigwigs from our partner companies will be there. Great networking opportunity." The party was in full swing when I arrived. Soft jazz played in the background as people mingled, drinks in hand. I was about to make a beeline for the punch bowl when I quite literally bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I stammered, looking up to see a pair of kind brown eyes. "No harm done," the man said with a warm smile. "I'm Michael, by the way. I don't think we've met." "Catherine," I replied, shaking his hand. "I'm from the economics department." We got to talking, and I learned that Michael was an executive from one of our partner companies. He was smart, funny, and easy to talk to. Before I knew it, hours had passed. As the party wound down, Michael asked for my number. "I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime," he said. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? I'd spent so much of my life taking care of others. Maybe it was time to let someone take care of me for a change. Our first date turned into a second, then a third. Before I knew it, we were officially a couple. Michael was everything I'd never known I wanted: kind, supportive, and he actually listened when I talked. A year later, he proposed to me. As we started planning the wedding, I faced a dilemma. Should I invite my family? Despite everything, they were still my parents, my sisters. After much thought, I sent the invitations. To my parents, to all my sisters, even Sarah. I also sent one to my grandmother, the one person who had always been there for me. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing from my parents or sisters. Then, one day, I got a call from Emily. "Kathy," she said, her voice trembling. "We got your invitation. Mom and Dad, they won't let us come. They won't even let us send you a card. I'm so sorry." The day of the wedding arrived. As I stood in front of the mirror in my white dress, I felt a mix of joy and sadness. My grandmother walked in, her eyes shining with tears. "Oh, Catherine," she said, hugging me tight. "You look beautiful. I'm so proud of you." As I walked down the aisle towards Michael, I saw the faces of our friends, his family, and my grandmother. My family wasn't there, but I realized something important: family isn't always about blood. It's about love, support, and acceptance. The years after our wedding flew by in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Michael and I settled into our life together, both of us continuing to work and build our careers. We traveled, we explored new hobbies together, and we talked endlessly about our future. And then we decided to start trying for a baby. Months passed, then a year, then 2. Nothing happened. We went through all the tests, tried every recommendation, but still, no baby. It was heartbreaking. The next few years were a roller coaster of hope and disappointment. We went through treatment after treatment, each failure hitting us harder than the last. One day, after another failed round of IVF, I broke down. "Maybe we're not meant to be parents," I sobbed into Michael's chest. He held me tight, stroking my hair. "Hey, look at me," he said gently. "We're going to be parents. Maybe not in the way we originally thought, but we will be. What do you think about adoption? A child is a child, Catherine. All they need is love, and we've got plenty of that." His words warmed my heart, and I felt a glimmer of hope. "Okay," I said, wiping my tears. "Let's do it. Let's adopt." The adoption process was long and often frustrating. There were so many forms to fill out, interviews to go through, home studies to pass. But we persevered, driven by our desire to give a child a loving home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. The day we met Lily was one I'll never forget. She was tiny, with big brown eyes and skin darker than ours. She looked scared and confused, clinging to her social worker's hand. I knelt down to her level. "Hi, Lily," I said softly. "I'm Catherine, and this is Michael. We've been waiting a long time to meet you." She looked at us warily, then back at her social worker. who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Lily reached out and took my hand. In that moment, I fell in love. This was our daughter. I didn't care that she didn't look like us or share our DNA. She was ours, and we were hers. When Lily was about 5, we sat her down and explained, in simple terms, how she came to be our daughter. We showed her pictures from the day we met her, told her how much we'd wanted her, how we'd fallen in love with her the moment we saw her. Lily listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When we finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So, you picked me?" she asked finally. I smiled, tears in my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Out of all the children in the world, we picked you. And we'd pick you again every single time." She beamed at us, then threw her arms around us both. "I love you, Mommy and Daddy," she said. As I held my daughter close, I thought about my own childhood. The pain, the neglect, the feeling of never being good enough. I vowed then and there that Lily would never feel that way. She would always know how loved and wanted she was. Life has a funny way of bringing you full circle. One day, Michael said his company had opened a branch in my hometown. And he will become the head of this branch. The move was chaotic, as moves tend to be. But as we settled into our new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to reach out to my sisters. My parents had passed away a few years back. I hadn't gone to the funeral. But my sisters, maybe it was time to mend those fences. I reached out to Jessica and Emily first. They were cautious at first, but eager to reconnect. We met for coffee, and it was like no time had passed at all. They cooed over pictures of Lily, told me about their own families, their kids. "We've missed you so much, Kathy," Emily said, squeezing my hand. "We're so glad you're back." For a while, everything was perfect. We started having family gatherings, holiday celebrations. Lily was thrilled to have cousins to play with, and I loved seeing her surrounded by family. But then there was Sarah, our youngest sister. From the moment we reconnected, I could tell she hadn't changed much. She was still the spoiled, entitled girl she'd always been, now grown into a woman who thought the world revolved around her and her family. At our first big family gathering, Sarah showed up with her husband and their son, Tommy. From the moment they arrived, it was clear that Sarah saw this as a competition rather than a reunion. "Tommy, show your aunties how well you can sing," she'd say, pushing her son forward. "He's taking lessons, you know. The teacher says he's a prodigy." As the party went on, I noticed Lily hanging back, looking uncomfortable. She approached Tommy, holding out a piece of candy. "Want to share?" she asked shyly. Before Tommy could respond, Sarah swooped in. "Tommy, don't take that," she screeched. "Throw it away. Her hands are dirty." I was across the room in an instant. "Sarah, what are you talking about? Lily's hands are clean." But Sarah just glared at me, then at Lily. "Well, you never know with her kind," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Come on, Tommy. Let's go play with your real cousins." I stood there, shocked and hurt. Did she really just say that? About my daughter? From that moment on, things were tense. Sarah made it clear at every gathering that she didn't consider Lily part of the family. She'd loudly proclaim that Tommy couldn't play with Lily because who knows what diseases she might have, or we don't know her genetic background. Each time, I'd confront her, defend my daughter. But the damage was being done. I could see Lily withdrawing, becoming quieter at these family events. One day, I made a decision. I wouldn't force Lily to attend these gatherings anymore. I started declining invitations, making excuses. Jessica and Emily understood, even though they were disappointed. As the dust settled from our move and the family drama that ensued, I found solace in my visits to Grandma. She had been my rock through everything, and now, in her twilight years, I wanted to be there for her as much as she had been for me. Every weekend, Lily and I would make the short drive to Grandma's house. She would be waiting on the porch, her face lighting up as soon as she saw us. "There's my girls," she'd call out, arms outstretched. Lily would race up the steps, throwing herself into Grandma's embrace. "Grandma, I missed you." Watching them together always warmed my heart. Grandma doted on Lily, showering her with love and attention. She never once treated Lily differently because she was adopted. To Grandma, Lily was family, plain and simple. As the months passed, Grandma's health began to decline. Our visits became less about long talks and more about quiet companionship. Lily would read to her, or show her drawings she'd made. Even in her weakened state, Grandma's love for us shone through. The day Grandma passed was one of the hardest of my life. We'd been there with her at the end, holding her hand as she slipped away peacefully. Lily, wise beyond her years, had climbed onto the bed and curled up next to her great-grandmother. "It's okay, Grandma," she'd whispered. "You can rest now. We love you." In the days that followed, as we dealt with our grief and the logistics that come with losing a loved one, we received some unexpected news. Grandma's lawyer called, asking us to come to his office. "Your grandmother left a will," he explained when we arrived. "And, well, you might want to sit down for this." What he told us next left me speechless. Grandma had left everything to me and Lily. The house, several cars, and over $1 million. "Your grandfather was quite successful," the lawyer explained. "And your grandmother was an astute investor. She had intended to leave it all to your mother, despite their estrangement. But when your mother passed..." I nodded, understanding. Grandma had changed her will, leaving everything to us. When word got out about the inheritance, my phone started ringing off the hook. Jessica and Emily called to congratulate me, saying I deserved it. But then came the call I'd been dreading. "Sarah." "Catherine," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "I heard about Grandma's will. So, when are you sharing the inheritance with the rest of us?" I felt a flash of anger. After everything she'd said and done, how dare she? "I'm not," I said firmly. "The inheritance is for me and Lily. That's what Grandma wanted." "But that's not fair," Sarah screeched. "I'm family too. I deserve..." I cut her off. "No, Sarah, you don't. Goodbye." And I hung up. As I put down the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long, I'd tried to please everyone, to be the perfect daughter and sister. But now, I realized it was time to put my own family first. It was Jessica's birthday, and despite my reservations, I decided it was time to make an appearance at a family gathering. When we arrived, the party was in full swing. Jessica's backyard was filled with laughter and chatter. Kids ran around playing tag while adults mingled, drinks in hand. For a moment, it felt like old times. Jessica embraced me warmly. "I'm so glad you came, Kathy," she whispered. I could see the genuine happiness in her eyes. For the first hour or so, everything was fine. Lily joined her cousins on the lawn, their laughter floating across the yard. I relaxed a bit, thinking maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. But then I saw Sarah. She was moving from child to child, whispering in their ears. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the way the kids' eyes widened, the way they glanced at Lily. Suddenly, Lily was standing alone. The other children had moved away, forming their own group, pointedly excluding her. I watched as my daughter's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. Before I could react, Lily ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," she sobbed, "they don't want to play with me anymore. They said I'm sick and not really family." Rage boiled up inside me. I hugged Lily close, then marched over to Sarah, who was watching the scene with a smug smile. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Sarah's smile didn't falter. "Oh, calm down, Catherine. I'm just telling the children the truth. They deserve to know about her condition." "Condition?" I spat. "The only person with a condition here is you, Sarah. Your behavior is disgusting." By now, we'd drawn a crowd. The other adults were watching, wide-eyed, as the confrontation unfolded. Sarah's face twisted into an ugly sneer. My behavior? That's rich coming from you, Catherine. You, who shamelessly took Grandma's money, robbing the rest of us of our rightful inheritance. And for what? To give money to that girl who isn't even really part of this family? Gasps echoed around us. How dare you, I seethed. Lily is my daughter. She is as much a part of this family as anyone else. Sarah laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. Family? She's not even related to us. She's just some random kid you picked up, probably born to drug addicts or criminals. She has no right to our family's legacy. I was shaking with fury now. You don't know anything about Lily or her birth parents. And it doesn't matter. She is my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world. Love? Sarah sneered. Is that what you call it when you use a child to steal from your own family? Face it, Catherine. You're nothing but a thief, using that girl to get Grandma's money. Well, we won't stand for it anymore. It's time you shared what rightfully belongs to all of us. I was about to respond when Jessica stepped forward, her face set in determination. That's enough, Sarah, she said firmly. You have no right to speak to Catherine like that, or to treat Lily this way. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. What, you're taking her side? Emily joined Jessica, standing beside me. We both are. Catherine has always been there for us, even when our own parents weren't. She raised us, Sarah. She deserves every penny of that inheritance. I felt a lump form in my throat, touched by my sister's support. Sarah's face contorted with rage. You traitors, how dare you? You're betraying the memory of our parents. Emily scoffed. Our parents? The same parents who neglected us and showered you with attention? The same parents who cut Catherine off for daring to want an education? Jessica nodded. And let's not forget, Sarah, how you took Mom and Dad's house and all their savings after they died. You didn't share a cent of that with any of us. I gasped, this information new to me. What? Is that true, Sarah? Sarah's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. It's true, Emily confirmed. She got everything when Mom and Dad passed, and she never once offered to share. A wave of disappointment and anger washed over me. All this time, Sarah had been accusing me of theft when she'd done the very same thing. Sarah, I said, my voice steady and firm. I think it's time for you to leave. You can't make me, she started, but Jessica cut her off. Yes, she can. This is my house, and I want you to go. We're all tired of your tantrums and your cruelty. Until you can treat Catherine and Lily with respect, you're not welcome here. Sarah looked around, realizing she was outnumbered. With a final glare, she grabbed her son's hand and stormed off. As the gate slammed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I turned to my sisters, tears in my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. Later that night, I made a decision. The next day, I called my sisters and told them my plan. Despite their protests that I didn't need to do this, I insisted. I gave them the house and the cars, keeping the $1 million for our family. With the inheritance settled, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I transferred half of the money to a trust fund for Lily's future, ensuring she would always be taken care of. The other half, Michael and I decided to use for our family. We'd take that trip to Disney World that Lily had been dreaming of. We'd renovate our home, creating the perfect space for our little family. And maybe, just maybe, we'd look into adopting another child, giving Lily the sibling she'd always wanted. I never asked to be born. Hell, my parents never asked for me either. The way my mom tells it, she was young and stupid, head over heels for some guy who couldn't keep it in his pants. Next thing you know, boom, baby on the way. That baby was me, Sheila, the mistake. Mom wanted to get rid of me, but both sets of grandparents found out and shut that down real quick. Back then, you didn't raise kids alone. So Mom and Dad got hitched, and I came along kicking and screaming 9 months later. Dad never let me forget how I'd ruined his life. "There goes my youth," he'd mutter every time he looked at me. To him, I wasn't a daughter, I was a ball and chain, dragging him down from the life he thought he deserved. For 10 years, it was just the three of us in that little house. Me, tiptoeing around, trying not to piss off Dad. Mom, cooking and cleaning like her life depended on it. And Dad, coming home from work with a scowl that only deepened when he saw me. Then came the miracle, my little sister. Sarah, the golden child. The one they actually wanted. And me? I was shoved even further into the background. "Sheila, watch your sister. Sheila, be quiet. Sarah's sleeping. Sheila, why can't you be more like Sarah?" It was Sarah this, Sarah that. She got new clothes, I got hand-me-downs. She got praise, I got scolded. She got love, I got used to disappointment. By the time I was 10, I was doing most of the housework. Scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, dusting shelves, you name it, I did it. Not that I got any thanks for it. It was just expected. But there was one chore I didn't mind, cooking. Something about mixing ingredients, creating flavors, it felt like magic. I remember the first time I made my special lasagna for a family gathering. Aunt Linda took a bite and her eyes lit up. "Mary, this is incredible. When did you become such a master chef?" Mom just smiled and nodded, soaking up the praise. I stood in the corner, invisible as always. "Actually, I made it," I said, trying to make my voice heard. Aunt Linda laughed, like I'd just told a joke. "Sheila likes to help in the kitchen sometimes," Mom cut in smoothly, still basking in the compliments. "Isn't that right, dear?" I shut my mouth, knowing it was pointless. No one ever believed me anyway. Growing up, the kitchen became my sanctuary. While Sarah got showered with attention and gifts, I found solace in pots and pans. By the time I hit high school, I could whip up a mean pot roast that even Dad couldn't complain about. "Not bad," he'd grunt, shoveling food into his mouth. Coming from him, that was high praise. But it wasn't just about feeding my family. I had bigger dreams. Every night, I'd close my eyes and picture it, my own restaurant, bustling with happy customers, all of them savoring my creations. One night at dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I want to open a restaurant someday," I blurted out. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Sarah snickered. "You? A restaurant?" Mom looked concerned, like I'd just announced I wanted to be an astronaut. Dad didn't even look up from his plate. "Restaurants fail all the time. You'd be broke in a month." "But I'm good at cooking," I protested. "Everyone likes my food." "Everyone likes free food," Dad scoffed. "Doesn't mean they'd pay for it." Sarah piped up, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Maybe you could work at McDonald's, Sheila. I hear they're always hiring." When it came time for college, I set my sights on the best culinary school I could find. To my shock, Dad agreed to pay for it. "This is your inheritance," he said gruffly. "Don't expect anything else. The house, the savings, that's all going to Sarah." I should have been hurt, but honestly, I was too excited about culinary school to care. This was my chance to prove myself, to learn from real chefs and hone my skills. College was a whirlwind of chopping, sautéing, and baking. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My classmates actually appreciated my cooking, and my instructors praised my creativity. But reality came crashing back when I graduated. With no money for my own place, I had to move back home. The contrast between my college life and my family's indifference was stark. "So, you're a chef now?" Sarah smirked over dinner. "Does that mean you'll be doing all the cooking from now on?" Mom jumped in before I could respond. "That's a wonderful idea. Sheila can cook, and you can focus on your studies, dear." And just like that, I was back to being the family maid. But this time, with a culinary degree gathering dust on my shelf. I managed to land a job as an assistant chef at a local restaurant. The pay was lousy, but it was a foot in the door. Every night, I'd come home exhausted, only to face a mountain of dishes and laundry. "This is your rent," Mom would say, handing me a list of chores. "You're not a child anymore. You need to contribute." But I didn't let it break me. Every spare moment, I was planning, dreaming, scheming. I knew that someday, somehow, I'd have my own restaurant. And when that day came, I'd show them all what Sheila was really capable of. 2 years crawled by, each day a carbon copy of the last. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked my ass off at the restaurant, and I watched as Sarah continued to be showered with everything I'd ever wanted. The day Sarah started high school, Dad came home with a shit-eating grin on his face. "Sarah, honey," he called out. "Come see what I got you." We all trooped outside. There, sitting in our driveway like some kind of shiny insult, was a brand new car. A fucking car. "But I can't even drive yet," Sarah said, her eyes wide. Dad laughed, tossing her the keys. "You will soon enough. My girl deserves the best, right from the start." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. When I turned 16, I got a second-hand bike. And even that was only because I needed it to get to my part-time job. It didn't stop there. Every week, there was something new for precious Sarah. The latest iPhone, a MacBook Pro, designer clothes. They even renovated her bedroom, turning it into something that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Meanwhile, I was still in my old room. The same faded wallpaper, the same creaky bed I'd had since I was 10. But hey, at least the spiders kept me company, right? I started thinking about moving out. Maybe I could find a roommate, split the rent on some tiny apartment. Anything would be better than this constant reminder of how little I mattered. But then came Christmas. I'd been saving up, determined to get everyone nice gifts for once. Show them I wasn't the failure they thought I was. I ended up buying lottery tickets for everyone, not the cheap scratch-offs, but tickets for the big jackpot. Christmas morning came, and I handed out the envelopes, trying not to look too eager. Mom opened hers first. Her face fell. "Oh, lottery tickets." Dad snorted. "What is this, a gas station gift?" Sarah didn't even bother opening hers. She just rolled her eyes. "Gee, thanks Sheila, real thoughtful." "Well," Mom said, her voice sickly sweet, "I guess since Sheila didn't really get us anything, she won't be expecting any gifts either. That seems fair, doesn't it?" I felt a lump forming in my throat. Without a word, I snatched the lottery tickets from Dad's hand. "You know what? I'll take them. Merry bloody Christmas." I stormed out, ignoring their shocked faces. Screw their family dinner. I texted my coworker, Jen. "Hey, you still at the restaurant? Mind some company?" An hour later, I was sitting at the bar of the closed restaurant, nursing a glass of cheap champagne with Jen. As the night wore on, Jen and I traded stories about horrible families and crushed dreams. It wasn't exactly a Hallmark Christmas, but at least I felt less alone. A few days later, I was at work as usual. During the break, I reached for my phone. There was a missed call from an unknown number. "Probably just another scam," I muttered, tossing the phone aside. But then it rang again. Same number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Hello, is this Sheila Thompson?" a cheery voice asked. "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Linda from the State Lottery Commission. I'm calling to inform you that you're holding a winning ticket." I almost dropped the phone. "What? Are you serious?" "Absolutely. One of your tickets matched all the numbers in Christmas drawing. After taxes, your winnings come to $690,000. The world spun around me. In a daze, I headed home. My mind was racing. This was it. My chance to finally open my own restaurant. To show everyone what I could do. I burst through the front door, unable to contain my excitement. You won't believe what happened. They were all sitting at the kitchen table, looking at me like I'd grown a second head. "I won the lottery," I blurted out. One of the tickets, the one I was going to give Mom, it won $690,000 after taxes. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then Sarah's shrill voice cut through the air. "That money belongs to us," she screeched. "You bought those tickets as gifts for Mom and Dad. Anything that belongs to them belongs to me." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What? No, they gave the tickets back to me. They're mine." Mom and Dad exchanged a look. "Sheila," Dad said slowly, "be reasonable. You live under our roof. You owe us. Now, hand over that ticket. We'll take care of everything." I took a step back, my hand instinctively going to my pocket where the ticket was. "No," I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice was. "This is my ticket, my win. I'm going to use it to open my own restaurant." Dad's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Now you listen here, young lady." "No, you listen," I shouted, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. "I've spent my whole life being treated like a second-class citizen in this family. Well, not anymore. This is my chance, and I'm taking it." "If that's how you feel," Mom said, her voice ice cold, "then you can get out of this house. Now." I stared at them, these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. In that moment, I saw them clearly for the first time. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm gone." I stormed up to my room, threw some clothes and essentials into a bag, and walked out. They watched me go, probably thinking I'd come crawling back in a day or two. They couldn't have been more wrong. My first stop was the lottery office, to claim my winnings. Then, I headed straight to a real estate agent. "I need an apartment," I told the surprised agent. "Something available immediately." By that evening, I was sitting in my very own place. It wasn't much, a small one-bedroom in a decent part of town, but it was mine. All mine. As I sat on the floor, I hadn't had time to buy furniture yet, eating takeout and scrolling through restaurant equipment catalogs on my phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. First things first, I needed a solid business plan. I spent weeks hunched over my laptop, researching, crunching numbers, and planning every detail. After what felt like a million revisions, I finally had a plan I was proud of. Next step, location. I scoured the city, looking for the perfect spot. Finally, I found it, a small, run-down space that had been empty for years. The landlord practically laughed when I said I wanted to turn it into a restaurant. "Good luck with that, sweetheart," he chuckled, handing me the keys. I spent the next 3 months turning that dump into my dream. I hired contractors, picked out every fixture, and personally scrubbed every inch of the place. It was backbreaking work, but every blister and bruise felt like a badge of honor. Finally, opening day arrived. I stood in the kitchen, my kitchen, surrounded by the staff I'd handpicked and trained myself. The first order came in, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. "Let's do this," I said, tying on my apron. The first few months were a whirlwind. I worked 18-hour days, cooking, managing, and doing whatever needed to be done. Slowly but surely, word started to spread. People loved my food, not just the taste, but the love and creativity I poured into every dish. I introduced a loyalty program for regular customers, giving them special discounts and first dibs on new menu items. It was a hit. Soon, I had a core group of regulars who came in so often, they felt like family. But I didn't stop there. I set up a delivery service, partnering with local couriers to bring my food right to people's homes. It was a gamble. Quality control was a nightmare at first, but it paid off. Social media became my new best friend. I posted daily specials, behind-the-scenes kitchen videos, and engaged with customers online. My follower count grew, and with it, my customer base. 2 years in, I was turning a profit. It wasn't huge, but it was something. I started looking for a second location. Opening the second restaurant was easier in some ways. I knew what I was doing now, but harder in others. Suddenly, I couldn't be everywhere at once. I had to learn to delegate, to trust my staff, to maintain my standards when I wasn't there. But we made it work. And 3 years after that, I opened my third location. Before I knew it, I was the owner of a successful restaurant chain. Me, Sheila Thompson, the girl who was never supposed to amount to anything. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was in over my head. Days when I wanted to throw in the towel and admit defeat. But every time I walked into one of my restaurants, saw the happy customers, smelled the delicious food, I knew it was all worth it. It was just another Tuesday. I was in my office, going over the books for my newest restaurant, when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a number I hadn't seen in years, home. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I answered, my voice cautious. "Sheila?" It was Mom. "Look, I know we've had our differences, but we need your help. It's about Sarah." Of course it was always about Sarah. "What about her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Dad's voice came on the line. "She's in trouble, Sheila, she lost her job. They're accusing her of theft, and now no one will hire her. We were hoping you might have a position for her at one of your restaurants." I almost laughed. After everything they'd put me through, they had the nerve to ask for a favor? But then I thought about Sarah. Despite everything, she was still my sister. "Let me talk to her," I said. Sarah came on the line, her voice small and scared. "Sheila, I'm sorry for everything. I really need help." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll give you a job, but listen up, there's no special treatment. You screw up, you're out. Got it?" "Yes. Thank you, Sarah gushed. The next morning, Sarah showed up right on time, looking nervous but determined. I put her to work as an administrator, starting her with basic tasks and slowly increasing her responsibilities. To my surprise, she seemed to take it seriously. She was attentive during training, asked good questions, and didn't complain about the work. One night, as we were closing up, Sarah broke down. "I need to tell you the truth," she sobbed. "I didn't steal anything from my last job. My boss, he tried to force himself on me. When I refused, he fired me and spread rumors that I was a thief." I felt a surge of protective anger. "Why didn't you report him? Who would believe me over him?" Sarah wiped her eyes. "I was so scared, Sheila. I didn't know what to do." "I believe you," I said, pulling her into a hug. "And I'm going to help you, okay? We'll figure this out together." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into teaching Sarah everything I knew about running a restaurant. She soaked it all up like a sponge, eager to learn and prove herself. As I watched her confidently handle a rush of customers, I felt a mix of pride and unease. Sarah was proving to be a quick study and a hard worker. But a nagging voice in the back of my head warned me not to let my guard down completely. At first, everything seemed perfect. Sarah threw herself into her work with an enthusiasm I'd never seen from her before. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, taking on extra shifts and volunteering for the toughest tasks. But then, whispers started reaching my ears. At first, I dismissed them as petty workplace gossip. But as the days went by, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Boss, Marco, my head chef, pulled me aside one day. "I think you need to know something. Your sister, she's been saying things. Stirring up trouble." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of things?" Marco looked uncomfortable. "She's been telling people that we're underpaid, that you're hoarding all the profits for yourself. She's even suggested we should go on strike." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's ridiculous. You all know how tight our margins are. I've always been transparent about the finances." "We know, boss," Marco assured me. "None of us are buying it. But there's more." He went on to tell me how Sarah had been claiming that the restaurant rightfully belonged to her, that I had somehow cheated her out of her share of the family money. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. After everything we'd been through, after I'd given her a second chance, this is how she repaid me? I confronted Sarah that evening, my hands shaking with anger and disappointment. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Sarah's face was a mask of innocence. "What are you talking about, sis?" I laid out everything I'd heard. To my shock, Sarah just shrugged. "Oh, that," she said casually. "I was just testing the staff's loyalty. You know, making sure they wouldn't turn on you. Looks like they passed with flying colors." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But something in her eyes, a glint of something cold and calculating, made me hesitate. Before I could press her further, we were interrupted by a frantic knock on my office door. It was Jenna, my assistant manager, looking pale and scared. "Sheila, we've got a problem," she said. "There's a big shortage in the cash register. Over $5,000 missing." We spent the next few hours going over the books, checking and rechecking the numbers. There was no mistake. A significant amount of cash had vanished. Only 3 people had access to that register: Jenna, Marco, and Sarah. I'd known Jenna and Marco for years. They'd been with me from the start, through all the ups and downs. I trusted them with my life. As if reading my thoughts, Sarah sidled up to me. "You know," she said in a low voice, "I've noticed Jenna staying late a lot lately. And she did just buy that fancy new car." As I watched her walk away, I knew I had a decision to make. I couldn't ignore this. Too much was at stake: my business, my reputation, the livelihoods of all my loyal employees. Late one night, after everyone had gone home, I installed hidden cameras around the cash registers. It felt wrong, like I was betraying my staff's trust. But I had no choice. For days, I watched hours of mundane footage, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. And then, on the 4th night, I saw it. Sarah, moving quickly and furtively, opened the register. Her hands darted in and out, stuffing wads of cash into her pockets. My heart sank. I didn't confront her, I couldn't. Instead, I called the police. The next day, as Sarah was finishing her shift, 2 officers walked in. The look on her face when she saw them, shock, then anger, told me everything I needed to know. She thrashed around, knocking over tables and sending dishes crashing to the floor. "I deserve this money. I should be rich, not you. You stole my life." As the police led her away, I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just a hollow emptiness where my love for my sister used to be. The next day, my parents stormed into the restaurant. Mom was crying, Dad's face was beet red with anger. "How dare you?" Dad roared. "Your own sister. Drop the charges now." I stood my ground. "No, she stole from me. She needs to face the consequences." I pulled out my phone, showing them the footage of Sarah stealing. "Look," I said. "This is what your precious Sarah did. She's a thief." They watched, their faces pale. But instead of understanding, their expressions hardened. "You set her up," Dad accused. "You've always been jealous of her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Jealous? Are you kidding me? You gave me scraps and expected me to be grateful. Well, I'm done. Sarah made her choices. Now she has to live with them." They ranted and raved, alternating between threats and pleas. But I stood firm. "Get out," I finally said. "Get out of my restaurant, get out of my life. If you don't leave now, I'm calling the police." They left, but not before Dad spat out, "You'll regret this, Sheila. Mark my words." The trial was a nightmare. Sarah's tearful performance on the stand almost had me doubting myself. But then came the surprise witness, her former boss. He testified about Sarah's behavior at her last job. How she'd aggressively pursued him, threatening to cry sexual harassment when he rejected her advances. How she'd stolen money from the company in retaliation. In the end, the jury found her guilty. As they led her away, she looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, only cold hatred. I haven't spoken to my family since that day. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I look around at what I've built, at the life I've made for myself, and I know I did. As I stand in the kitchen of my newest restaurant, watching my staff prepare for the dinner rush, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. This is my family now. This is my home. And nobody, not Sarah, not my parents, not anyone, can take that away from me. My name's Pamela, and up until recently, I was just your average workaholic advertising specialist. I lived and breathed my job at this fancy agency in the heart of the city. You know the type, big glass building, top floor office with a view that'd make your head spin. I was good at what I did, damn good actually. The agency relied on me for pretty much everything. I was your typical career-focused woman in her early 30s. No husband, no kids, just me and my work. My tiny apartment was more like a pit stop between office hours than an actual home. I'd roll in late at night, crash for a few hours, then head right back out. Rinse and repeat. My boss, well, she was something else. Picture a 60-something woman with more ambition than empathy. She owned the agency, and boy, did she let everyone know it. Her name was Vivian, but we all called her Mrs. Crawford behind her back. To her face? It was all yes, ma'am, and right away, ma'am. One particular Monday morning, I dragged myself into the office, feeling like death warmed over. I'd caught some nasty bug over the weekend, but deadlines wait for no one, especially not in Vivian's world. I was hunched over my computer, trying to focus on the quarterly report through my fever haze, when Vivian's voice cut through the office like a knife. Pamela, my office, now. I stumbled to her door, knowing full well what was coming. The report was late, and Vivian Crawford did not do late. What the hell is this? She snarled, waving a printout in my face. You call this a report? Any 5-year-old could put together something more coherent than this garbage. I'm sorry, Ms. Crawford, I mumbled, my head pounding. I've been sick, Anne. Sick? She scoffed. You think clients care if you're sick? You think I built this agency by taking sick days? You're useless, Pamela. Utterly useless. Her words hit me like a slap. I'd poured my heart and soul into this job for years, sacrificed everything for it. And this was what I got in return? I don't know if it was the fever or just years of pent-up frustration, but something in me snapped. Tears welled up in my eyes, and before I knew it, I was bolting out of her office, past the shocked faces of my coworkers, and into the elevator. The elevator dinged, and as the door slid open, I came face to face with a pair of concerned brown eyes. Hey, are you okay? A deep voice asked. I looked up, startled by the voice. Standing there was a man about my age, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. I must have looked a sight, because his brow furrowed even deeper when he saw my face. I'm fine, I stammered, trying to regain my composure. But the tears betrayed me, streaming down my cheeks. You don't look fine, he said gently. Look, I know it's none of my business, but would you like to grab a coffee? Sometimes talking to a stranger can help. I hesitated. I never did things like this, running out of work, crying in elevators, accepting invitations from strangers. But something about his genuine concern broke through my defenses. Actually, I sniffled, that sounds nice. We made our way to a little cafe just down the street. As we sat down with our coffees, he introduced himself as Jake. So, he said, settling into his chair, want to tell me what's got you so upset? I found myself pouring out the whole story, how I'd been feeling ill, how I was behind on my work, and how my boss had torn into me. I was careful not to mention any names or specifics about the company, but I didn't hold back on describing how devastated I felt. Wow, Jake said when I finished. That's rough. No one deserves to be treated like that, especially when they're sick. We ended up talking for over an hour. Jake told me about his own job in finance, his hobbies, his dog. It was easy, comfortable conversation, and I found myself laughing, despite the awful morning I'd had. As we were getting ready to leave, Jake hesitated. "Listen, Pamela. I know we just met, but I'd really like to see you again. Maybe we could grab dinner sometime?" I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. We exchanged numbers, and as I watched him walk away, I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I started seeing each other regularly. We'd meet for dinner after work, or spend weekends exploring the city. With each date, I found myself falling harder for him. He was kind, funny, and supportive, everything I'd been missing in my life. At work, things were, well, they were what they always were. Vivian was still Vivian, demanding and critical. But somehow, it didn't bother me as much anymore. Knowing I had Jake to talk to at the end of the day made it all more bearable. One night, about a year after we'd met, Jake took me to a fancy restaurant. As we finished our dessert, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. "Pamela, will you marry me?" Happy tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded enthusiastically. Yes, of course I'll marry you." As Jake slipped the ring on my finger, I felt like I was floating on air. Everything was perfect. Jake was perfect. Our life together would be perfect. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of happiness. One evening, as we cuddled on the couch in my apartment, Jake brought up something I hadn't even considered. "Babe," he said, running his fingers through my hair, "I think it's time you met my mom. She's been asking to meet you. How about this weekend? We can drive out to her place." That Saturday, we pulled up to a house that made my jaw drop. It was huge, easily 3 times the size of the house I grew up in. The door swung open, and I froze. Standing there, looking just as shocked as I felt, was Vivian Crawford, my boss, Jake's mother. "Mom," Jake said warmly, oblivious to the tension, "this is Pamela, my fiancée." Vivian's eyes narrowed as they swept over me. "Pamela," she said, her voice cold. "What a surprise." "Jake, darling, surely you can do better than this." She waved her hand dismissively in my direction. "With your money, your position, you could have any woman you want. Why settle for someone from such a modest background?" I felt like I'd been slapped. Jake's arm tightened around me. "Mom," he said, his voice hard, "I love Pamela. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm marrying her, with or without your approval." Vivian's face darkened, but Jake didn't give her a chance to respond. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "I'm so sorry about this, Pam. Let's go." As we drove away, I finally found my voice. "Jake," I said shakily, "there's something I need to tell you." I spilled everything, how Vivian was my boss, how she'd treated me at work, the incident that led to me meeting Jake in the first place. Jake listened silently, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I finished, he pulled the car over and turned to face me. "Pamela," he said firmly, "I want you to know that this changes nothing. I love you, and I'm on your side, no matter what." His words were like a lifeline, and I clung to them desperately. We decided to move forward with our wedding plans, despite Vivian's disapproval. Jake and I found a small apartment together, and for a while, everything seemed okay. But at work, things were getting worse. Vivian's treatment of me had always been harsh, but now it was downright cruel. She'd humiliate me in meetings, mock my ideas in front of clients, and pile on impossible deadlines. Yet she never fired me. I was too valuable to the agency, and we both knew it. I'd come home every night exhausted and demoralized. Jake was always there, supportive and loving, but I could see the toll it was taking on him too. He'd confront his mother, begging her to treat me better, but it only seemed to make things worse. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'd been working on a massive presentation for weeks, pouring every ounce of creativity and effort I had into it. As I stood in front of the management team, including Vivian, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this time I'd finally earn her approval. I was halfway through my pitch when Vivian's cold voice cut through the room. "Is this a joke, Pamela? This is what you've been working on for weeks. This is amateur work at best. I've seen interns produce better concepts than this drivel." The room fell silent. I could feel the pitying looks from my colleagues, but no one dared to speak up against Vivian. "I can revise it," I stammered, fighting back tears. Vivian waved her hand dismissively. "Don't bother. We'll have someone competent handle it from here. You're dismissed." I fled the conference room, my cheeks burning with humiliation. As soon as I reached my desk, I broke down in tears. It was too much. The constant criticism, the public humiliation, the stress of navigating this impossible situation with my mother-in-law. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, I stumbled into our apartment, still sniffling. Jake took one look at me and pulled me into a tight hug. "That's it," he said firmly. "You can't keep doing this to yourself, Pam. You need to quit. Your mental health is more important than any job." The next day, I marched into Vivian's office and handed in my resignation. Her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little thing," she sputtered. "After everything this agency has done for you? You're just going to abandon us?" I stood my ground, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm sorry, but I can't continue working in this environment. My last day will be in 2 weeks." As I turned to leave, Vivian's voice stopped me cold. "You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. You'll regret this, Pamela. Mark my words." I threw myself into job hunting, confident that my skills and experience would land me a new position quickly. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to worry. Every promising lead seemed to fizzle out at the last minute. It was as if someone was sabotaging my efforts. Finally, after nearly 6 months of searching, I landed a job at a smaller agency. It wasn't as prestigious as my old position, but I was grateful for the opportunity. As I settled into my new role, I began to feel like things were finally looking up. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Just as I was starting to feel secure in my new job, my boss called me into his office. The moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. "Pamela," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "I'm afraid we have to let you go. Your work has been excellent. It's just, well, I can't say more, but my hands are tied. I'm sorry." As I packed up my desk in a daze, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Vivian. "How does unemployment feel, dear? Perhaps now you'll learn your place." In that moment, I realized the true extent of my mother-in-law's vindictiveness. She hadn't just threatened to ruin my career, she was actually doing it. The following months were a blur of anxiety and frustration. No matter how many resumes I sent out or interviews I went to, I couldn't seem to land a job. I started picking up freelance gigs just to make ends meet, but it was barely enough to cover our bills. One afternoon, as I sat at our kitchen table, scrolling through job listings I knew would lead nowhere, my phone rang. It was Vivian. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Pamela, dear," Vivian's saccharine voice oozed through the speaker. "I just thought I'd check in on my favorite daughter-in-law. You know, Jake's birthday is coming up soon." I froze. In all the chaos of the past few months, I'd completely forgotten about Jake's birthday. "I was thinking," Vivian continued, her voice suddenly warm, "why don't we surprise him? We could throw a party at my house. All his friends, family, it would be lovely, don't you think? It's time we put our differences aside, don't you think? Jake'd be so happy to see us getting along." As much as I wanted to refuse, I couldn't deny that Jake would love to see his mother and wife reconcile. And after everything he'd done for me, didn't he deserve a special birthday? "All right," I said hesitantly. "What did you have in mind?" Vivian's voice brightened. "Wonderful. Why don't you come over early on the day of the party? We can set everything up together. It'll be our little secret from Jake." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The day of the party arrived, and I made my way to Vivian's house, my stomach in knots. As I approached the front door, I could hear voices and laughter inside. As I stepped inside, I was shocked to see the house already full of guests. Vivian's phone was in her hand, apparently live streaming the event. "Everyone," Vivian announced loudly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I'd like you all to greet our help for the evening." Before I could process what was happening, Vivian thrust a maid's uniform into my hands. "Here you go, dear. The kitchen's that way. Chop chop, these guests won't serve themselves." I stood there, stunned, as the room fell silent. All eyes were on me, a mix of pity and second-hand embarrassment on their faces. "What's the matter?" Vivian sneered, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "This is what you're suited for, isn't it? A girl from the slums, parents who worked in a factory. You should be grateful I'm giving you the opportunity to serve your betters." The humiliation was overwhelming. Tears pricked at my eyes as I looked around the room, desperately searching for a friendly face, for someone to stand up to this cruelty. But everyone averted their gaze, unwilling to challenge Vivian. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I'd endured months of Vivian's torment, but this was a step too far. Without a word, I dropped the uniform at Vivian's feet and stormed out of the house, ignoring her calls behind me. I burst into our apartment, a mess of tears and anger. Jake was there, getting ready to head to his mother's house. He took one look at me, and his face fell. When I told him everything, Jake's face paled. He grabbed his phone and quickly pulled up his mother's social media page. There it was, the video of my humiliation, already gaining views and nasty comments. Jake's hand shook as he watched the video. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the love for his mother warring with his love for me. But as Vivian's cruel words rang out from the phone speakers, his jaw set in determination. He dialed Vivian's number, putting the phone on speaker. When she answered, her voice was sickly sweet. "Jake, darling, where are you? Everyone's waiting." "Save it, Mom," Jake cut her off. "I saw the video. How could you do that to Pamela?" There was a pause, then Vivian's voice turned cold. "Oh please, Jake. I was just putting her in her place. You know she's not good enough for you. I was doing you a favor." "No, Mom," Jake interrupted again. "You weren't doing me any favors. You were being cruel and manipulative. I love Pamela, and I won't let you treat her like this anymore. We're done. Don't contact us again." He hung up before Vivian could respond. The silence in our apartment was deafening. Jake turned to me, his eyes soft. "I'm so sorry, Pam. I had no idea she would go this far." I fell into his arms, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. We spent the rest of the evening together, ignoring the constant ringing of Jake's phone. It was only the next morning that we realized the full extent of Vivian's retaliation. Jake's boss called him in for an emergency meeting. When he returned home a few hours later, his face was ashen. "They fired me," he said, his voice hollow. "Apparently, the CEO is a close friend of my mother's. She asked him to let me go." We spent the next few days trying to figure out our next move. With both of us unemployed and Vivian's influence seemingly everywhere, our options felt limited. "Maybe," Jake said hesitantly one evening, "maybe we should consider moving. Start fresh somewhere else, away from my mother's influence." The idea was tempting, but something nagged at me. "Jake," I said slowly, "why did your parents get divorced? You've never really talked about it." Jake's face clouded over. "I don't really know the details. Mom always said Dad abandoned us, that he didn't want anything to do with me. Dad tried to contact me a few times when I was younger, but Mom always intercepted the calls, told me he was just trying to manipulate us." An idea started to form in my mind. "Jake, what if we reached out to your dad? Maybe he could shed some light on all of this." We arranged to meet Jake's father, Robert, at a quiet cafe the next day. As we walked in, I spotted an older man who bore a striking resemblance to Jake. His face lit up when he saw us, and he stood to greet us with a warm, if slightly awkward, hug for Jake. "You must be Pamela," he said, turning to me with a kind smile. "It's wonderful to meet you." As we settled in with our coffees, Robert's face grew serious. "Jake, I can't tell you how happy I am to hear from you. But I have a feeling this isn't just a social call. What's going on?" Jake took a deep breath and began to explain everything: Vivian's treatment of me, her sabotage of our careers, the humiliating party incident. Robert listened intently, his face growing darker with each revelation. "Dad," Jake said hesitantly, "what really happened between you and Mom? Why did you divorce?" Robert's eyes clouded over with a mix of anger and sadness. "It's a long story, son. One I'm not proud of. You see, I used to work for my father's company. Your mother was in the accounting department. I thought we were happy, but..." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. "One day, the police showed up at the office. Your grandfather was arrested for tax evasion. It all happened so fast, the company was in chaos, and suddenly your mother was taking charge, saying she'd keep things running." Jake and I exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. This sounded awfully familiar. Robert continued. "I had my suspicions. Your mother had access to all the financial records, and she'd been pushing for more control in the company for months. I confronted her, asked her if she had anything to do with framing your grandfather. She didn't deny it," Robert continued. "Instead, she threatened me. I had an affair. It was brief, but your mother found out. She had evidence, photos, messages, everything." Jake and I exchanged a shocked glance as Robert continued, his voice heavy with regret. "The woman I had the affair with, her husband was an incredibly influential man in our industry. Your mother threatened to tell him everything unless I did exactly as she said. She gave me an ultimatum: divorce her, give her everything, and stay away from you, or she'd destroy me completely. I'm ashamed to say I took the coward's way out. I thought I was protecting you, Jake." As we sat there, processing everything we'd learned, a memory suddenly hit me. "Jake," I said urgently, "remember when I first started at the agency? I noticed some discrepancies in the books. I even took some pictures, thinking I might need to bring it up to Vivian later." Jake's eyes widened. "Pam, are you saying?" I nodded. "I think your mother might be doing the same thing she did to your grandfather. If we can prove it." After our revealing conversation with Robert at the cafe, we all decided to return to our apartment. As soon as we entered, I made a beeline for my laptop. Jake and Robert watched intently as I booted it up, their anticipation palpable. "Here they are," I said, pulling up the folder containing the incriminating photos. Just as I remembered. Jake and Robert leaned in, their eyes widening as they took in the images on the screen. Clear as day, there was evidence of double-entry bookkeeping, one set of books for the tax authorities, and another showing the true state of the company's finances. Jake's face set in determination. "We need to take this to the authorities right away. Mom can't keep getting away with this." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We contacted the tax authorities, presenting them with the evidence I had uncovered. They launched a full and in-depth audit of Vivian's agency. The investigation was thorough and relentless. The scale of tax evasion was staggering. Vivian was arrested and charged with multiple counts of tax evasion and fraud. The trial was swift, and the evidence overwhelming. In the end, the judge handed down a harsh sentence: Vivian would be spending several years in prison. In the aftermath of Vivian's conviction, the court decided to transfer ownership of the agency to Jake, as the closest family member not implicated in the crimes. It was a lot to take in, and we spent many late nights discussing what to do next. One evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset, Jake turned to me with a smile. "You know, Pam, I've been thinking. This agency needs a fresh start, a new direction. And I can't think of anyone better to lead it than you." I stared at him in shock. "Me? But Jake, He cut me off gently. "You're brilliant, Pam. You saw what was happening when no one else did. You have the skills, the vision, and the integrity to turn this agency into something we can be proud of. What do you say? Will you be our new executive director?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. After everything we'd been through, after all the times Vivian had tried to tear me down, here I was, being offered the chance to lead the very agency she had used to torment me. The next few months were busy as we restructured the agency. We implemented strict ethical guidelines, rebuilt client relationships, and created a work environment based on respect and creativity. Slowly but surely, the agency's reputation began to recover. Through it all, Robert was there, offering support and advice. Over time, the awkwardness faded, and we found ourselves enjoying Sunday dinners together, rebuilding the family bonds that Vivian had tried so hard to destroy. My name is Monica, and my story begins in a bustling household where love was abundant, if not always equally distributed. Growing up, our home was a cacophony of laughter, cries, and the constant patter of little feet. I was the second oldest, sandwiched between my brother Jake, who was just a year my senior, and my two younger sisters, Emma and Lily, who came into our lives when I was already in my early teens. From an early age, I learned the art of responsibility. While other kids my age were out playing, I was often found in our modest kitchen, helping Mom prepare dinner, or in the living room, cradling a fussy Emma or Lily. It wasn't always easy, but it taught me invaluable lessons about compassion and hard work. Our parents, John and Sarah, were hardworking individuals who dreamed of giving us a better life than they had. Dad worked long hours at the local factory, while Mom juggled part-time jobs and household duties. They weren't rich by any means, but they managed to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. However, there was an undercurrent in our family dynamics that I couldn't ignore. Jake, my older brother, seemed to hold a special place in our parents' hearts. "Jake's the oldest," Dad would say, ruffling his hair affectionately. "He's carrying on the family name. That comes with responsibilities and perks." As we grew older, the disparity became more apparent. When it came time for high school graduation, Jake got a car. I got a heartfelt card and a promise that they'd help with college expenses. It wasn't that I was unloved, far from it. But the preference was clear, and it shaped our family dynamics in subtle ways. My sisters, Emma and Lily, looked up to me with adoring eyes. Being significantly younger, they often saw me as a second mother figure. I took this role seriously, determined to be the kind of role model they deserved. As high school drew to a close, I set my sights on college. My parents, true to their word, had set aside money for our education. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a start. I chose to study finance, a practical field that I hoped would lead to a stable career. My chosen field of study, finance, proved to be as demanding as I'd anticipated. Long nights in the library became my new normal, but I tackled each assignment with the same determination I'd applied to helping Mom with household chores. Despite the workload, I made sure to call home regularly. Mom would fill me in on the family gossip, Dad would grunt his hellos, and my sisters would fight over the phone to tell me about their days. Jake's updates were less frequent, usually relayed through Mom. He'd started working at a local company, showing little interest in further education. Our parents, especially Dad, seemed pleased with his progress. "Your brother's really finding his feet in the business world," Dad would say during our infrequent conversations. "He's got a knack for it." I'd murmur my agreement, pushing down the small spark of competitiveness that flared up. This wasn't a race, I reminded myself. We each had our own paths to follow. As the years passed, I threw myself into my studies and part-time jobs, determined to make the most of the opportunity my parents had given me. Their financial support, while not covering everything, was a lifeline I was deeply grateful for. I knew the sacrifices they were making to keep me in school, and I was determined not to let them down. Graduation day arrived before I knew it. As I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I scanned the crowd for my family. There they were, Mom and Dad beaming with pride, Emma and Lily waving enthusiastically, and even Jake had made it, standing a bit apart with a half smile on his face. After the ceremony, Mom hugged me tight. "We're so proud of you, honey," she said, her eyes glistening. Dad nodded, patting my shoulder awkwardly but affectionately. "You've done well, Monica. Now it's time to make your mark in the world." As we celebrated over dinner, I shared my plans to stay in the city and start my career. A part of me had considered returning home, but the opportunities here were too good to pass up. My entry-level position at a financial firm demanded long hours. Visits home became less frequent, limited to major holidays and the occasional long weekend. But I never forgot my roots, calling regularly and sending care packages to my sisters. It was during one of my rare visits home, nearly a decade after I'd first left for college, that everything changed. I was sitting in the kitchen with Mom, catching up over coffee, when my phone rang. It was my boss. "Monica, I have some news," he said, his voice unusually serious. "We're opening a new branch in your hometown, and I want you to head it up. It's a big promotion, but it would mean relocating. Are you interested?" "Yes," I heard myself say. "I'm definitely interested." When I got the job offer back in my hometown, my company said they'd pay for an apartment. But Mom and Dad insisted I move back home. "Come on, Monica," Mom pleaded, "it'll be just like old times." I couldn't say no. On my first day back, I walked into our old house. It looked smaller than I remembered. Emma and Lily, now in their late teens, ran to hug me. Jake lived separately and was already engaged. Later that night, after unpacking, I sat with Emma and Lily in our old room. It felt good to be back, listening to their stories and laughing together. "So, tell me about Jake's fiancée," I said. Emma and Lily shared a look. "Her name's Vanessa," Emma said slowly. "She's different." Lily nodded. "Yeah, she's from a rich family. Her dad owns the company Jake works for now." Something in their tone made me curious. "Different how?" They didn't say much more, just shrugged and changed the subject. I decided to drop it for now. The next few weeks were busy. I started my new job, setting up the branch office. It was hard work, but I loved it. In the evenings, I'd help Emma and Lily with homework or chat with Mom while she cooked dinner. One Sunday, we were all sitting around the table when the doorbell rang. Mom jumped up to answer it. "It's Jake and Vanessa," she called out. I stood up, eager to see my brother and meet his fiancée. Jake walked in first, looking sharp in a suit. Behind him was a tall, slim woman with perfect hair and clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Vanessa looked around our house like it was beneath her. "Oh, how quaint," she said, picking up one of Mom's knickknacks. I watched, confused, as Mom and Dad fussed over her. They kept asking if she needed anything, apologizing for the smallest things. Emma and Lily were quiet, eyes down. When Vanessa made a nasty comment about Lily's clothes, I'd had enough. I pulled Emma aside. "What's going on?" I whispered. "Why is everyone letting her act like this?" Emma sighed. "Jake works for her dad now. It's a big deal. Mom and Dad are scared if we upset her, Jake might lose his job." I was shocked. This wasn't the family I knew. We'd never let anyone treat us like this before. Things got worse at dinner. Vanessa started on me, making snide remarks about my job and clothes. I saw red. "Look," I snapped, "I don't know who you think you are, but in this house, we treat each other with respect. If you can't do that, maybe you should leave." The room went silent. Vanessa's face turned ugly. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. Jake followed, looking torn. As soon as they left, Mom and Dad rounded on me. "Monica, how could you?" Mom cried. "You know how important this is for Jake." Dad looked disappointed. "You need to control your temper. This could ruin everything for your brother." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They kept at it, begging me to apologize, to be the bigger person. Finally, just to shut them up, I agreed to try and make peace with Vanessa. The weeks flew by, and suddenly Jake's wedding was all anyone could talk about. Vanessa took charge, bossing everyone around like she was running a military operation instead of planning a party. She dragged us to endless dress fittings, insisting we buy expensive gowns that matched the venue's aesthetic. When I suggested something more affordable, Vanessa just laughed. "Oh, Monica," she sneered, "we can't have you looking cheap at my wedding, can we?" The bachelorette party was next on her list. Vanessa handed out a minute-by-minute schedule, complete with mandatory activities and outfit changes. It was ridiculous, but Mom kept giving me these pleading looks, so I bit my tongue. Then came the bombshell. Vanessa wanted us to dance at the wedding. Not just a simple waltz, mind you. No, she was planning a full-on performance. "It'll be the highlight of the reception," she gushed. "You'll all look so cute." My stomach dropped. I'd hurt my back years ago in a car accident. Dancing wasn't really my thing anymore. But I figured, how bad could it be? Turns out, pretty bad. I showed up at the dance studio, and the choreographer started talking about splits and lifts and all sorts of crazy moves. Vanessa was there, barking orders like a drill sergeant. "Come on, ladies, put your backs into it." I pulled out my phone, thinking I'd record it to practice later. But as I watched, I realized there was no way I could do this. It was way too much. "Hold on," I said, "this is insane. We're not circus performers, Vanessa. I can't do these moves." Vanessa's face turned ugly. "What do you mean, you can't? Of course you can. Stop being difficult, Monica." I stood my ground. "No, I mean it. I have an old back injury. This kind of dancing isn't possible for me." That's when Vanessa really lost it. She started yelling, throwing around words I won't repeat. Then she hit me with this gem. "Fine. If you won't dance, you owe Jake $3,500 as a wedding gift. It's only fair, since you're ruining my special day." I was speechless. I looked at Emma and Lily, hoping they'd back me up. But they just stared at the floor, Mom's warnings clearly ringing in their ears. That was it. I'd had enough. "You know what, Vanessa? Keep your damn dance. I'm out of here." I stormed out of the studio, my hands shaking as I clutched my phone. The video of that disastrous rehearsal was still recording. As I walked home, my mind raced. What was I going to do now? How had things gotten this messed up? I burst through the front door, still fuming from the dance rehearsal fiasco. Mom and Dad were in the living room, and they could tell something was wrong. I spilled everything: the impossible dance routine, Vanessa's outrageous behavior, the $3,500 ultimatum. I expected sympathy, maybe even anger on my behalf. What I got was something else entirely. Dad's face turned red. "Monica, how could you? After everything we've talked about. This wedding is so important for Jake's future. You need to apologize to Vanessa right now and agree to do the dance." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Apologize? For what? Having a spine injury? Standing up for myself? "Stop being so selfish," Dad shouted. "This isn't about you. It's about Jake's happiness and success." "So my happiness doesn't matter?" I shot back. "My health?" The argument escalated quickly. Voices raised, tears were shed. I stood my ground, refusing to cave to Vanessa's ridiculous demands. That's when Dad dropped the bomb. "If you can't support your brother and his fiancée, then maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The room went silent. I packed a bag that night, ignoring Mom's half-hearted attempts to smooth things over. The next day, I moved into the apartment my company had originally offered. It was small and empty, but at least it was mine. The wedding came and went. I didn't attend, couldn't bear the thought of watching my family kowtow to Vanessa's every whim. I spent that day alone in my apartment, alternating between anger and sadness. A few days later, my phone exploded with notifications. Vanessa had made a post on social media, a long, dramatic tale about how I had tried to ruin her perfect day. She painted herself as the victim, me as the jealous, spiteful sister-in-law. The comments were worse. Relatives I hadn't seen in years were suddenly experts on my character, condemning me for my selfish and cruel behavior. Even Emma and Lily liked the post, a betrayal that cut deep. The call started soon after. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all wanting to tell me how disappointed they were, how I should be ashamed of myself. Emma tried to reach out once, sent a text saying she missed me. But when I suggested meeting up, she backpedaled, said Vanessa wouldn't like it. I didn't try again after that. I threw myself into my work, hoping to finish the project quickly and leave this town behind. But things kept getting delayed, problems cropping up that required my personal attention. Each extension felt like a twist of the knife. Months passed, and I settled into a lonely routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I'd almost gotten used to the silence when my phone rang one night. It was Lily. Monica? Her voice was small, trembling. Can we talk? We met at a cafe across town, away from prying eyes. Lily looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess. She burst into tears the moment she saw me. I'm so sorry, Monica, she sobbed. You were right about everything. Slowly, the whole story came out. After the wedding, Vanessa had shown her true colors. She'd been ordering Emma and Lily around like servants, making them clean her house, cook meals, do laundry, all without pay. She says it's our duty as family, Lily said bitterly. And Jake, he just goes along with it. He sees how she treats us, and does nothing. My blood boiled. What about Mom and Dad? Surely they don't approve. Lily's laugh was hollow. They think it's great. Say we're building character and cementing family bonds. It's like they're brainwashed or something. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was worse than I'd imagined. I'm so sorry I didn't stand up for you before, Lily whispered. I was scared. We all were. But now, I can't take it anymore. Please, Monica, help us. The next day, I marched over to our parents' house. Mom answered the door, her smile fading when she saw me. Monica, what are you doing here? I pushed past her into the living room. Dad was there, looking up from his newspaper with a frown. We need to talk, I said. About Vanessa. About how she's treating Emma and Lily. Mom's face hardened. I don't know what Lily's been telling you, but... Don't, I cut her off. Don't try to deny it. I know everything. How can you let this happen? They're your daughters. Dad stood up, his voice cold. Now you listen here, Monica. Vanessa is family now. She's given Jake opportunities we could only dream of. If the girls need to pitch in a little, that's a small price to pay. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A little? She's treating them like slaves. And you're okay with this? You're exaggerating, Mom said weakly. The girls are fine. They're just... Just what, Mom? Just being abused by their sister-in-law while their parents look the other way? Dad's face turned red. That's enough. I won't have you coming in here, stirring up trouble. Vanessa is Jake's wife. She's wealthy, connected. She can give this family a future. If you can't accept that, then maybe you're not really part of this family anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at them, these strangers wearing my parents' faces. So that's it? I said quietly. You're choosing money over your own children? Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad just glared. Get out, he said. And don't come back until you're ready to apologize to Vanessa and Jake. I left, my legs shaky, my heart breaking all over again. As I walked away from my childhood home, I realized a hard truth: I couldn't change their minds. They were too far gone, too seduced by the promise of wealth and status. But I couldn't abandon Emma and Lily. Somehow, some way, I had to find a way to help them. To save them from Vanessa, from our parents' willful blindness, and from the fate they seemed determined to accept. That day started like any other. I was preparing for a big meeting, reviewing notes, and straightening my jacket. Then I saw the name on the guest list, Robert Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries. Vanessa's father. My heart raced. He wouldn't know me, I'd missed the wedding, after all. But I knew him, the man whose money had torn my family apart. The meeting began, all handshakes and forced smiles. Robert didn't give me a second glance. We discussed business, crunched numbers, argued points. Then came the coffee break. I found myself next to Robert, both of us refilling our cups. He started chatting, casual small talk that somehow turned to parenting. You know, he said, puffing up with pride, I raised my Vanessa to be humble. Never let her flaunt our wealth. She grew up modest, well-mannered. Even married a regular guy. She respects everyone, treats them like family. Something in me snapped. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and hit play on a video I'd almost forgotten about. There was Vanessa, red-faced and screaming at the dance rehearsal. You stupid scum, she shrieked on screen. Pay $3,500 or get out. I won't have you ruining my wedding. The color drained from Robert's face. He watched, horrified, as his daughter berated me, my sisters, the other bridesmaids. When it ended, silence fell. I had no idea, Robert whispered. She's always so polite around me. I thought. I believed. I steeled myself for anger, for him to storm out. Instead, he looked at me, eyes pleading. Please, he said. Tell me everything. So I did. The cruel comments, the forced labor, the way she'd turned my family against me. With each word, Robert seemed to age years. I'm so sorry, he said when I finished. I've failed as a father. Please, let me try to make this right. Before I could respond, he was on his feet. Come with me, he said. Now. We drove to Jake and Vanessa's house in silence. Robert's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The scene inside was worse than I'd imagined. Emma was there, wearing a maid's uniform, scrubbing floors. Vanessa lounged on the couch, barking orders. Robert exploded. Vanessa, what is the meaning of this? How dare you treat people like this? Your own family. Vanessa's shock turned to anger. She pointed at Emma. I won't apologize to servants. Robert's face turned purple. That's it. You're cut off. No more money, no more house. I'm ashamed to call you my daughter. Jake tried to intervene. Sir, please. The girls don't mind helping out. It's no big deal. Robert rounded on him. And you? Letting your wife abuse your sisters? You're fired. Both of you, out of my sight. He turned to me and Emma, his voice softening. I'm so sorry. For everything. Please, let me help make this right. As we left, Vanessa's shrieks fading behind us, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also sadness. This was a Pyrrhic victory at best. The fallout from Robert's intervention was swift and merciless. Instead of seeing reason, my parents doubled down on their support for Jake and Vanessa. They were furious with me, blaming me for ruining Jake's cushy life. How could you do this to your own brother? Mom wailed over the phone. He had everything, and now it's all gone because of you. Dad was even worse. You've always been jealous of Jake, he spat. Well, congratulations. You've destroyed this family. Don't bother coming around anymore. You're not welcome here. Their words hurt, but I wasn't surprised. They'd made their choice long ago, and it wasn't me or my sisters they'd chosen. I threw myself into work, finishing up the project that had kept me in my hometown for so long. The day it was complete, I packed up my apartment and left without looking back. I found a new position in another city, desperate for a fresh start. Months passed. I built a new life, made new friends, tried to forget the family that had rejected me. But I couldn't stop worrying about Emma and Lily. I'd send texts, but the responses were always short, evasive. Then, one rainy night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Emma and Lily, soaked to the bone, suitcases in hand. "Monica," Emma said, her voice breaking. "We need your help." Over cups of hot tea, they told me everything. Jake and Vanessa, broke and jobless, had moved back in with our parents. But instead of humbling them, it had made Vanessa even more tyrannical. "She treats the house like her personal kingdom," Lily explained. "And us? We're just her servants." "Mom and Dad don't do anything," Emma added. "They're so afraid of Jake leaving that they let Vanessa do whatever she wants." My heart broke for them. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" They exchanged guilty looks. "We were ashamed," Lily admitted. "And scared. Vanessa threatened to make things even worse if we reached out to you." "But we couldn't take it anymore," Emma said. "Please, Monica. Can we stay with you? Just until we find jobs and our own place?" I didn't hesitate. "Of course you can. Stay as long as you need." It wasn't easy at first. My apartment was small, and we were all adjusting to living together as adults. But slowly, we found our rhythm. I helped them polish their resumes, practiced interview techniques with them. We stayed up late, talking through years of pain and misunderstandings. Weeks turned into months. Emma found a job at a local bookstore, while Lily started taking classes at a nearby community college. They insisted on contributing to rent and groceries, even though I told them it wasn't necessary. One night, as we sat around the dinner table, laughing over some silly story, I realized something. Our parents might never come around. Jake and Vanessa might never change. But that was okay. We had each other, and that was enough. As I looked at my sisters, strong, resilient, finally free to be themselves, I knew we'd be all right. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. As a real family should. I never knew what a real family was supposed to be like until I was 7 years old. My name's Rebecca, but everyone calls me Becky. I grew up thinking that all families were like mine, cold, distant, and devoid of affection. My dad, a successful dentist with his own practice, and my mom, who worked as his nurse, provided for me materially, but that was about it. From as far back as I can remember, hugs and kisses were foreign concepts in our house. My parents never showed any warmth towards me, and I just assumed that's how things were supposed to be. We lived in a nice house, had good food on the table, and I always had clean clothes to wear. But something was missing, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Our family didn't socialize much. We rarely had visitors, and I never went to other kids' houses. It was just us, in our own little bubble. Looking back, I realize how isolated we were, but at the time, it seemed normal. Everything changed when I made friends with a girl in my class, Sarah. One day, she invited me over to her house after school. I remember walking into her home and feeling like I'd stepped into another world. Sarah's mom greeted us at the door with a warm smile. "Hi, sweetie," she said, pulling Sarah into a tight hug. "And you must be Becky. It's so nice to meet you." Before I knew what was happening, she had wrapped her arms around me too. I froze, not knowing how to react. The hug was nice, warm, comforting. All these new sensations washed over me, and I felt my eyes start to water. As we sat in Sarah's living room doing our homework, I couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. Sarah's mom would pop in occasionally, asking if we needed anything, ruffling Sarah's hair, or giving her a quick peck on the cheek. Each time, I felt a pang in my chest. When it was time for me to go home, Sarah's mom offered to drive me. As we pulled up to my house, she turned to me with a kind smile. "It was lovely having you over, Becky. You're welcome anytime." Then, to my absolute shock, she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "Good night, sweetie." I stumbled out of the car, my mind reeling. As I walked into my house, I saw my parents sitting in the living room, engrossed in their own activities. My mom was reading a book, while my dad was looking over some papers. "I'm home," I said hesitantly. My mom barely glanced up. "Did you finish your homework at Sarah's?" "Yes," I replied, then gathered my courage. "Mom, Dad, why don't you ever kiss me goodnight?" The silence that followed was deafening. My mom finally looked up from her book, her expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "What are you talking about, Rebecca? We feed you, clothe you, and provide a roof over your head. That should be enough for you." I felt my heart sink. "But that's enough, Rebecca," my dad interjected, not looking up from his papers. "Go to your room and get ready for bed." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized for the first time that something was wrong in our family. The warmth I had felt in Sarah's home was completely absent in mine. And as I drifted off to sleep, I wondered why my parents couldn't love me the way Sarah's mom loved her. As I grew older, the stark difference between my family and others became increasingly apparent. By the time I hit my teenage years, I had a clearer understanding of what was wrong. My mother was the root of the problem. Mom had always been a cold woman, seemingly incapable of showing emotion towards anyone, let alone affection. It wasn't just me she treated this way. I noticed she was equally distant with Dad. It was as if she was made of ice, impenetrable and unyielding. I started noticing more and more how burdened they seemed by their parental duties. They'd attend parent-teacher meetings, sure, but their faces always held barely concealed irritation, as if they'd rather be anywhere else. When my 16th birthday rolled around, I had a foolish hope that things might change. Maybe they'd surprise me with a heartfelt gift or even just a warm hug. Instead, I got a cold dose of reality. "Rebecca," Mom said over breakfast, her tone as flat as ever. "Your father and I need to discuss something with you." Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to make it clear that you shouldn't expect us to pay for your college education. We're not required to do so." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I stared at them, unable to speak. "You're old enough now to start thinking about your future," Mom continued, not noticing or not caring about my shocked expression. "If you want to go to college, you'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourself." I nodded numbly, pushing away from the table. "Thanks for letting me know," I managed to say before retreating to my room. That day marked a turning point for me. I realized that if I wanted anything in life, I'd have to get it for myself. My parents weren't going to help me, they'd made that crystal clear. After graduating high school, I knew I needed to start earning more money. College seemed like a distant dream, but I was determined to make it happen someday. That's how I found myself working as a waitress at Joe's Diner, a small local restaurant just a few blocks from our house. Joe, the owner, was a middle-aged man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a belly that spoke of too many taste tests in the kitchen. When I applied for the job, he looked me up and down with a grin that made me slightly uncomfortable. Well, he said, stroking his chin. "You'll definitely attract customers with those looks, sweetheart. You're hired." 3 months into my new job, my life took another dramatic turn. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was getting ready for my afternoon shift when my parents called me down for breakfast. This was unusual. We rarely ate together, let alone had conversations over meals. As I sat down, I noticed my parents exchanging glances. My mother, her face as impassive as ever, spoke first. "Rebecca, your father and I have some news," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "We've decided to sell the house and move to Europe. The sale will be finalized next month." I waited for them to continue, to tell me about their plans for me. But the silence stretched on. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "So, what about me?" I asked, my voice small. "Am I coming with you?" My parents exchanged another look, this one tinged with what seemed like annoyance. My father cleared his throat. "Rebecca, you're an adult," he said, his tone matter of fact. "It's time for you to find your own place to live. We've fulfilled our duty. You're of legal age now, which means you need to figure things out on your own." Anger and disbelief warred inside me. "This is my home too." I shouted, standing up so quickly my chair toppled over. "You can't just throw me out." My father actually laughed, a cold, humorless sound that sent chills down my spine. "This house is my property, Becky. You have no claim to it." Tears stung my eyes as the full weight of their callousness hit me. Without another word, I ran upstairs and started throwing my belongings into a suitcase. As I was about to leave, my parents stopped me at the door. "Show us what's in the suitcase," my mother demanded, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? You think I'm stealing from you?" "We just want to make sure you're not taking anything valuable," my father said, as if it was the most reasonable request in the world. That was the last straw. Years of pent-up anger and hurt came pouring out of me in a torrent of curse words and accusations. I screamed at them, calling them every nasty name I could think of, telling them they were the worst parents in the world. They didn't even flinch. When I ran out of steam, my mother simply opened the door and gestured for me to leave. With nowhere else to go, I headed to Joe's diner for my shift, dragging my suitcase behind me. Joe looked up from behind the counter, his eyebrows shooting up when he saw my suitcase. "Becky, what's going on?" I tried to keep it together, I really did. But as soon as he asked, the dam broke. Tears started streaming down my face as I told him everything, how my parents were selling the house, moving to Europe, and had kicked me out without a care in the world. Joe listened, his face growing more concerned with each word. When I finished, he reached out and took my hand. "Oh, sweetheart, that's terrible. Listen, I might be able to help you out." For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. But then I saw the look in his eyes, and my stomach dropped. "You could stay at my place," he continued, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of my hand. "But you'd need to show me how grateful you are." I yanked my hand away, disgust replacing my sadness. "Are you kidding me?" Joe's face hardened. "Fine, have it your way. But if you're not going to take my offer, you can consider yourself fired. I don't need your drama in my diner." I rented a room at a cheap hostel for the night. As I sat on the lumpy bed, I pulled out my phone and opened my parents' social media pages. I'd never paid much attention to them before, but now I scrolled through their friends lists desperately, looking for any relatives who might be willing to help me. One by one, I reached out to them, explaining my situation. And one by one, they turned me down. Some were polite about it, others less so, but the result was the same: no one wanted to take me in. Just when I was about to give up hope, I got a message from someone I'd never met, my mother's aunt, Evelyn. She lived in another state but said she'd be willing to let me stay with her for a while. With no other options, I used the last of my money to buy a bus ticket to Aunt Evelyn's town. When I finally arrived, Aunt Evelyn was waiting for me at the bus station. She looked a lot like my mother, the same sharp features and steely eyes. "Rebecca," she said, nodding at me. "Welcome." As we drove to her house, Aunt Evelyn laid out the ground rules. "You can stay in the spare room. I expect you to keep it clean and help out around the house. And you'll need to find a job, I'm not running a charity here." The next few weeks fell into a routine. I found a job at a local cafe, worked long hours, and spent my free time cleaning Aunt Evelyn's house and cooking meals. She was always polite but distant, watching me with a wariness I couldn't understand. One evening, as I was dusting the living room, my eyes fell on a framed photograph I hadn't noticed before. It showed a young man with a bright smile, his arm around a younger version of Aunt Evelyn. "Aunt Evelyn?" I called out. "Who's this in the photo?" I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. When I turned around, I saw something I never expected, tears in Aunt Evelyn's eyes. That's my son," she said, her voice cracking. "He died in a car accident 10 years ago." I put down the duster and did something I'd never done before: I hugged her. To my surprise, she hugged me back, her body shaking with silent sobs. When we finally pulled apart, Aunt Evelyn looked at me with wonder. "You know, I always thought you'd be just like your mother, cold and unfeeling." I shook my head, feeling my own tears welling up. And I thought you were just like her too. I guess we were both wrong. As the days passed, Aunt Evelyn and I grew closer. The warmth I'd always craved from my parents, I found in her. We'd spend evenings talking, sharing stories, and slowly healing the wounds of our pasts. For the first time in my life, I felt truly loved and accepted. One evening, about 2 months after I'd arrived, Aunt Evelyn sat me down with a serious look on her face. My heart skipped a beat, fearing the worst. Was she going to ask me to leave? "Rebecca," she began, her voice soft but firm. "I want to talk to you about something important. When my son died, I set aside money for his college education. It's been sitting in an account for years now, and, well, I've been thinking." She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I want you to have it, for your education." I stared at her, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. "What? But that's your son's money. I can't." "You can, and you will," Aunt Evelyn said firmly. "My boy would have wanted it to be used for something good. And you, Rebecca, you deserve a chance at a better life." Without hesitation, I threw my arms around her, sobbing into her shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you so much." And just like that, my life changed again. I enrolled in the local college as a business major, determined to make Aunt Evelyn proud. We settled into a new routine. I'd go to classes during the day, work part-time at the cafe in the evenings, and spend my nights studying at the kitchen table while Aunt Evelyn knitted in her favorite armchair. For 2 years, life was good. Better than good, actually. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. I had a loving family, I was getting an education, and I felt like I was finally on the path to a bright future. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when there was a knock at the door. I was home alone, working on a paper for my marketing class. Assuming it was a package delivery, I opened the door without a second thought. The woman standing on the porch made my blood run cold. Her hair was grayer, her face more lined, but there was no mistaking those cold, hard eyes. "Hello, Rebecca," my mother said, her voice as emotionless as ever. I gripped the doorframe, my knees suddenly weak. "Mom, what are you doing here?" She looked past me into the house, her lips pursed. "I need to speak with Evelyn. Is she home?" I shook my head, still in shock. "She's out running errands. She'll be back soon." My mother nodded curtly. "I'll wait, then." Before I could protest, she brushed past me into the house. I closed the door, my mind racing. What was she doing here? After 2 years of silence, why now? As we sat in uncomfortable silence in the living room, I took a good look at my mother. She wasn't the well-put-together woman I remembered. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt. There was a desperation in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, I broke the silence. "Why are you here, Mom?" She met my gaze, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of emotion. But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. "I need help," she said flatly. "Your father and I, we're no longer together. We moved to Italy, as planned. Your father, he met someone else. A younger woman. He left me for her." Before I could respond, we heard the front door open. Aunt Evelyn walked in, her arms full of grocery bags. When she saw my mother, she froze. "Helen," Aunt Evelyn said, her voice clipped. "What brings you here after all this time?" My mother straightened her posture, trying to regain some of her old authority. "Evelyn, I need your help. I've fallen on hard times." Aunt Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. "Oh? And what about your comfortable life in Italy?" "Things didn't work out as planned," my mother replied, her voice tight. "John left me for another woman. I have nowhere else to go. You're my only option, Evelyn." Aunt Evelyn let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, that's rich coming from you, Helen. Do you remember when I needed your help? When I lost my son and couldn't even afford a proper funeral? Where were you then? I saw my mother flinch, but she quickly regained her composure. That was different. Different? Aunt Evelyn interrupted, her voice rising. How was it different? Because it wasn't you who needed help. The tension in the room was unbearable. I felt like I should say something, do something, but I was frozen in place, watching this family drama unfold. My mother's eyes suddenly locked onto me. Rebecca, she said, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. You owe me, I'm your mother. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. I owe you? You kicked me out without a second thought. You told me I was on my own. And now you have the nerve to say I owe you? I raised you, my mother began, but I cut her off. You provided the bare minimum, I spat out. Food, clothes, a roof over my head. But you never gave me what I really needed, love, support, affection. You were cold and distant my entire life, and when I needed you most, you threw me out like I was nothing. My mother's face paled. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. And now you come here, expecting help? Expecting me to forget everything you've done, or rather, everything you didn't do? Well, guess what, Mom? I'm doing just fine without you. I found someone who actually cares about me, who supports me, who loves me. I don't need you anymore. The room fell silent after my outburst. Aunt Evelyn stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. I think it's time for you to leave, Helen, she said firmly. My mother looked between us, realization dawning on her face. Without another word, she stood up and walked to the door. As the door closed behind her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I turned to Aunt Evelyn, who pulled me into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, she murmured, stroking my hair. You stood up for yourself. You're stronger than you know. As I cried into her shoulder, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, anger, and strangely, a sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I had confronted my mother and spoken my truth. It hurt, but it also felt like the beginning of healing. About a week after the incident, I was walking across campus when I overheard a group of my classmates whispering and glancing in my direction. As I got closer, I caught snippets of their conversation. That's her, the one whose mother. Can you believe she'd abandon her own mom? My stomach dropped. How did they know about what happened? I quickened my pace, my cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. It didn't take long to figure out what was going on. My mother had taken up residence in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town and had started showing up at the college, telling anyone who would listen about how her ungrateful daughter had abandoned her in her time of need. For days, she sat on a bench near the main entrance, accosting students and staff alike with her tale of woe. My classmates began to whisper behind my back, some giving me looks of pity, others of judgment. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my studies, but it was hard. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling class where I could feel everyone's eyes on me, I broke down and told Aunt Evelyn everything. The next day, with Aunt Evelyn by my side for moral support, I approached a group of my classmates who were huddled near the campus coffee shop. I took a deep breath and spoke up. Hey, guys. I need to talk to you about something. About my mother. They turned to look at me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. And so, I began to talk. I told them everything, about my childhood in a cold, loveless home, about being kicked out the moment I turned 18, about struggling to survive on my own until Aunt Evelyn took me in. As I spoke, I saw their expressions change from skepticism to shock, and finally, to understanding. By the time I finished, there were tears in more than a few eyes. One of my classmates, Sarah, stepped forward and hugged me. Becky, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. Your mom, she made it sound so different. Word spread quickly after that. My classmates, now armed with the truth, became my fiercest defenders. When my mother tried to approach them with her tales of abandonment, they shut her down. The college security, alerted to the situation, began escorting her off campus whenever she showed up. A week later, I heard through the grapevine that my mother had given up and left town. She had returned to our hometown, taking a job as a nurse at the local clinic and renting a small apartment. I felt relieved and calm. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. After the tumultuous events with my mother, I found my footing again and threw myself back into my studies with renewed determination. My grades improved, and I was on track to graduate with honors. One ordinary afternoon, as I was reviewing notes for an upcoming exam, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from an unexpected sender, my father. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, curiosity and apprehension mingling in my chest. The message read, "Rebecca, I hope this finds you well. I'm reaching out because I have a proposition for you. I've remarried in Italy and have a young son now. We could use some help with childcare. Would you consider coming to stay with us? You could be a nanny for your half-brother. I know you probably don't have many prospects there, so this could be a great opportunity for you." I stared at the screen, a mixture of disbelief and amusement washing over me. After years of silence, this was what he had to offer. A job as an unpaid nanny for a half-brother I'd never met? The audacity was almost comical. Without hesitation, I typed a single word in response, "No." Seconds later, my phone buzzed again. My father, clearly taken aback by my curt reply, began asking questions. Where was I living? How was I supporting myself? What was I doing with my life? A mischievous smile played on my lips as I scrolled through my photo gallery. I selected a picture of myself on campus, beaming in front of the business school building, and another of me laughing in Aunt Evelyn's cozy kitchen. I sent these images without comment. The response was immediate. Message after message flooded in, each more frantic than the last. How had I managed to go to college? Where was I getting the money? Whose house do I live in? I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Then I typed out one final message, "That's none of your business." With a sense of finality, I blocked his number. Months passed, and before I knew it, graduation day arrived. As I stood in line, waiting to receive my diploma, my eyes scanned the audience. There, in the third row, sat Aunt Evelyn, her face glowing with pride. She clapped the loudest when my name was called, and I couldn't help but beam as I crossed the stage. Looking at Aunt Evelyn, I made a silent vow. I would build a life that would make her proud. I would take the love and support she had given me and pay it forward. I would show her, and the world, that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, love, and commitment. My name's Sarah, and I've got a story to tell you. I grew up in a military family, just me and my dad. Mom couldn't handle the stress of constant moves and took off after I was born. Dad, bless him, did his best, but he was always away on duty. So, I ended up living with my grandmother for most of my early years. When I was about 3, Dad remarried. A year later, my half-sister, Emily, came along. I didn't see much of them at first, still living with Grandma and all. But things changed when I turned 10. Dad retired from the military, got a fat pension, and bought a house. He came to get me, saying it was time for us to be a proper family. I was excited at first. A new house, a new family, it seemed like a dream come true. But reality hit hard and fast. My stepmom, Linda, was okay, I guess. She tried to make me feel welcome, but it was clear Emily was her priority. And Emily? Well, she was a nightmare from day one. "That's my room," she screamed when Dad showed me to my new bedroom. "I want it. Make her sleep in the attic." Dad tried to calm her down. "Emily, honey, there's plenty of space for both of you. Sarah needs a room too." But Emily wasn't having it. She threw herself on the floor, kicking and screaming. I stood there, suitcase in hand, feeling like an intruder in what was supposed to be my home. That was just the beginning. Emily made it her mission to make my life hell. She'd accidentally spilled juice on my homework, draw on my textbooks, and hide my things. I learned pretty quick that in this house, Emily could do no wrong. No matter what she did, it was always, "Sarah, be the bigger person," or "Sarah, you need to set a good example." So, I stopped complaining. I learned to hide my important stuff and ignore Emily's antics as best I could. But it wasn't just Emily making things tough. When I was 12, the doctor dropped a bombshell on us. I had problems with my thyroid, hyperfunction, he called it. He said I'd live a normal life, but having kids would probably be off the table. I remember sitting in that sterile office, the words washing over me like ice water. Dad squeezed my hand, trying to comfort me, but I felt numb. At 12, having kids wasn't exactly on my radar, but knowing it might never happen? That hit hard. Emily, being the brat she was, overheard and started calling me empty nut. It stung, but I tried not to let it show. I buried myself in my computer games, finding solace in virtual worlds where I could be anyone, do anything. Life trudged on, and before I knew it, I was 16. That's when everything changed again. Grandma passed away, leaving me her inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make Emily's eyes go wide with envy. "It's not fair," she whined at the dinner table. "Why does Sarah get all the money? We should use it for a family vacation." Dad backed me up, surprisingly. "Emily, that's Sarah's inheritance. She can decide what to do with it." I had plans for that money. All those hours spent gaming hadn't just been an escape, they'd given me an idea. I wanted to open a network of computer clubs for teenagers, maybe even a camp for training esports athletes. A place where kids like me could feel at home, surrounded by people who got it. When I shared my idea, Emily laughed so hard she nearly choked on her peas. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Who'd want to go to a nerd camp?" "It's not dumb," I shot back. "Esports is growing. It could be big." High school graduation couldn't come fast enough. College was a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I could just be Sarah, not the girl with the annoying sister, or the one who couldn't have kids. I threw myself into my studies, focusing on business management. All the while, my dream of the esports camp simmered in the back of my mind. After graduation, I took a leap of faith. I packed my bags and headed to South Korea for an internship. If I was going to learn about esports, why not go to the Mecca? Those 3 years in Korea were intense. I worked my ass off, learning everything I could about running gaming centers and managing teams. I saw firsthand how esports could change lives, giving kids a sense of purpose and belonging. When I finally came back home, I was ready. I used Grandma's money to rent a small space and turned it into my first computer club. It wasn't much, just a dozen computers and some second-hand furniture, but it was mine. The first few months were tough. Some days, I'd sit there alone, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. But slowly, word spread. Kids started trickling in after school, then flooding in on weekends. 5 years flew by in a blur of expansion, tournaments, and sleepless nights. Before I knew it, I had 5 thriving clubs and a full-fledged training camp for aspiring esports athletes. My team was racking up wins left and right. I was so focused on work that dating wasn't even on my radar. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was at a gaming convention. I was there scouting new talent when I quite literally ran into him. Coffee went flying, splattering both our shirts. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," I stammered, frantically grabbing napkins. He just laughed, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. "No worries. I needed a wake-up call anyway. I'm Jake." "Sarah," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. We ended up talking for hours, long after our shirts had dried. Jake was a game developer, passionate about creating educational games for kids. He got my vision for the clubs in a way few others had. As we said goodbye, he hesitated. "Listen, Sarah, would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? Preferably without wearing it?" Our coffee date turned into dinner, then weekend trips, and before I knew it, a year had flown by. He was different from anyone I'd ever met, supportive, kind, and he actually listened when I talked about my work. One night, over a homemade dinner, Jake got down on one knee. I was overjoyed, but a nagging voice in the back of my head wouldn't let me fully embrace the moment. "Jake, wait," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know." I told him about my thyroid condition, about the likelihood that we'd never have children. I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. Jake just smiled and took my hands in his. "Sarah, I love you. Kids or no kids, I want to spend my life with you. We'll face whatever comes together." Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, too choked up to speak. He slipped the ring on my finger, and just like that, we were engaged. When we went to tell my family, I was a bundle of nerves. Dad was thrilled, of course. He clapped Jake on the back so hard I thought he might knock him over. "Welcome to the family, son," he boomed. Linda offered a tight smile and a quick hug. "And Emily?" She didn't even bother to come downstairs to meet Jake. I could hear her music blasting from her room, a clear message that she couldn't care less about my engagement. The wedding ceremony was perfect, simple, heartfelt, surrounded by our closest friends and colleagues. As we exchanged vows, I felt like my heart might burst with happiness. At the reception, I scanned the room, a small part of me still hoping to see Emily. Instead, a waiter approached with a large, beautifully wrapped box. "A delivery for the bride," he announced. The sender said to open it in front of everyone. My heart skipped a beat. Could this be Emily's way of making amends? Hopeful, I tore into the wrapping paper. But as I lifted the lid, my blood ran cold. Inside were baby clothes, tiny onesies, booties, and bibs. The room fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, could almost hear the whispers starting. Jake was at my side in an instant, his arm around my waist. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I couldn't speak. Tears stung my eyes as the realization hit me, this wasn't an olive branch. It was a deliberate, cruel reminder of what I couldn't have. Jake took one look in the box and understood. His jaw clenched, but his voice was gentle when he spoke to our guests. "Looks like someone jumped the gun on baby gifts," he said with a forced laugh. "How about we get back to the dancing?" As I danced with Jake, laughed with our friends, a small part of me couldn't help but wonder, would I ever truly be free of my sister's shadow? The years after the wedding flew by in a whirlwind of work and ambition. I threw myself into expanding my business, driven by a mix of passion and, if I'm honest, the need to prove myself. Those computer clubs I dreamed of? They were thriving. But the real jewel in my crown was the esports training camp. I spent more and more time at the camp, coaching and mentoring. It was incredible to watch these kids grow, not just in their gaming skills, but in confidence and teamwork too. But while my professional life was soaring, my personal life was complicated. Every visit to my parents' house felt like walking into a minefield. Emily's hostility hadn't lessened over the years, if anything, it had intensified. She'd make snide comments about how I'd stolen Grandma's money, how I was getting rich off her inheritance. "Must be nice," she'd sneer, living it up while the rest of us struggle. I tried to brush it off, but her words stung. "Emily, I worked hard for everything I have," I'd say, trying to keep my voice level. "Grandma's money just gave me a start." But she'd just roll her eyes and mutter something about how I always got everything handed to me. Dad and Linda would try to intervene, to smooth things over, but it was useless. The rift between us just kept growing. I started avoiding family gatherings when I could. It was easier to make excuses about work than to deal with Emily's constant jabs. Jake was my rock through it all, always ready with a hug and a reminder that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "You're amazing," he'd tell me, his eyes full of love. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that." But there was one doubt that kept creeping in, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Kids. We'd been trying for a while now, hoping against hope that the doctors had been wrong. Each month brought a new wave of disappointment. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor one night, staring at yet another negative pregnancy test. Jake found me there, silent tears streaming down my face. "Hey," he said softly, sliding down to sit beside me. "It's okay. We knew this might happen, remember?" I nodded, unable to speak. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself break down. "I just wanted to prove them wrong," I sobbed. "To show that I could have it all, the career, the family." Jake stroked my hair gently. "Sarah, listen to me. You are not defined by whether or not you can have kids. You're changing lives every day with your work. You're building a legacy that goes beyond biology." His words helped, but the ache remained. We talked about other options, adoption, surrogacy, but for now, we decided to focus on our life together and my growing business. 10 years. It hardly seemed possible that a decade had passed since I opened my first computer club. As the anniversary approached, I decided it was time for a celebration, not just of my success, but of all the kids whose lives had been touched by our programs. I spared no expense for the party. The main hall of our flagship camp was transformed into a glittering wonderland of tech-themed decorations. Gaming stations were set up alongside a lavish buffet, blending the world of esports with classic party elements. The guests started arriving, current and former students, parents, industry colleagues, even a few local celebrities who'd taken an interest in our work. I plastered on my best hostess smile, greeting everyone warmly. Then I saw Emily. My heart dropped to my stomach. What was she doing here? I certainly hadn't invited her. She was arm in arm with a guy I didn't recognize, probably her latest boyfriend. To my surprise, she seemed subdued. No snide remarks, no eye rolling. Just a quiet congratulations as she passed by. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this evening without incident. The party was in full swing. Kids were showing their parents their favorite games, business contacts were being made over hors d'oeuvres, and the general buzz of excitement filled the air. I was just starting to relax when I saw Emily making her way to the stage. My blood ran cold. What was she doing? Before I could react, she had grabbed the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone. I have something to say." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Emily. "I know we're here to celebrate my sister's success," she began, her voice sickly sweet. "But I think it's important that you all know the truth." I felt rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. "Parents, do you really want your children spending time in a place run by someone who can't possibly understand their needs?" Emily's eyes found mine in the crowd, a cruel glint in them. "My sister can't have children of her own. How can a childless woman truly know what's best for your kids?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Emily wasn't done. "I, on the other hand, am pregnant." She paused, letting that sink in. "And I'm opening my own esports camp. One run by someone who actually understands children, who will experience the joys and challenges of parenthood firsthand." I stood there, shell-shocked, as Emily's words hung in the air. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Years of buried pain about my infertility came rushing back, threatening to overwhelm me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Thank God for Jake. He was at my side in an instant, his arm around my waist, steadying me. "Let's get some air," he murmured, but I shook my head. I couldn't let them see me run away. Jake squeezed my hand and turned to address the crowd. "Well, folks, how about we lighten the mood? I hear the chefs have outdone themselves with the dessert spread. Why don't we all head over for a tasting?" As the murmuring crowd moved towards the buffet, I slipped away to a quiet corner. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, seeing notification after notification popping up. Our live stream. I'd completely forgotten about it in the chaos. Comments were flooding in. Some were supportive. "What that woman did was disgusting. Sarah, you're an inspiration. Having kids doesn't make you a good mentor. Sarah's track record speaks for itself." But others were brutal. How can she run a camp for kids when she can't even have her own? I wouldn't want my child around someone so unnatural. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I pasted on a smile and made small talk when necessary, but inside, I was crumbling. Jake handled most of it, smoothly covering for me when I fell silent or lost track of conversations. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, chaos erupted near the exit. There was a scream, then a thud. I rushed over to see what had happened. My heart stopped. Emily was sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, clutching her stomach, her face contorted in pain. Her boyfriend was kneeling beside her, panic written all over his face. "Someone call an ambulance," he shouted. As he helped Emily to her feet, her eyes locked onto mine. The hatred I saw there chilled me to the bone. "You," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this. You pushed me." I recoiled, shocked. "What? No, I didn't, I wasn't even near." But Emily wasn't listening. As her boyfriend started to lead her out, she kept screaming. "You're jealous of my baby. You couldn't stand that I can have what you can't." Her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had long since healed. I stood there, frozen, as they disappeared through the doors. The remaining guests were staring, some with suspicion, others with pity. I felt exposed, raw, like my deepest insecurities had been laid bare for all to see. The morning after the party, I was nursing a cup of coffee, trying to make sense of the previous night's chaos, when there was a knock at the door. Jake answered it, and I heard low, serious voices. My stomach dropped. "Sarah?" Jake called, his voice tight. "There's a police officer here to see you." I walked to the door on shaky legs. The officer, a stern-faced woman, introduced herself as Detective Martinez. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm here about the incident involving your sister last night," she said. "She's filed a complaint against you. She's lost the baby, and is accusing you of pushing her down the stairs." Jake stepped in, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "We have a full recording of the event. It was being live-streamed." We spent the next few hours going over everything with Detective Martinez. I provided the live stream footage, the guest list, statements from staff and guests. By the end, I was exhausted but hopeful. Surely, with all this evidence, they'd see I was innocent. A few days later, Detective Martinez called. "Mrs. Thompson, we've concluded our investigation," she said. "You've been cleared of all suspicion." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. "We've identified the actual perpetrator," she continued. "It was your sister's boyfriend, Mark Stevens. We have clear video evidence of him pushing her." I felt sick. But why? "He confessed during questioning," Detective Martinez explained. "Apparently, he didn't want to marry your sister or have a child with her. He claimed she was forcing him into marriage by threatening to create a scandal. Your sister has been informed of the findings." I thanked her and hung up, feeling numb. It was over. I was cleared. But why didn't I feel relieved? The answer came in the form of a vitriolic voicemail from Emily later that day. "This is all your fault," her voice screeched through the speaker. "If you hadn't upset me so much at that stupid party, Mark wouldn't have felt pressured to do this. You're the reason I lost my baby." I listened, dumbfounded, as she ranted on, spinning increasingly illogical reasons why I was to blame. According to Emily, I had somehow manipulated Mark into pushing her. I had created such a stressful environment that it drove him to it. On and on she went, each accusation more outlandish than the last. The fallout from Emily's accusations didn't stop with her voicemail. A few days later, I got a call from Dad. His voice was heavy, tired. "Sarah, honey," he said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but Linda's taken Emily's side in all this." I closed my eyes, feeling a fresh wave of pain wash over me. "What do you mean, Dad?" He sighed deeply. She says you're not welcome in the house anymore. That you've caused enough trouble." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd never been close to Linda, but to be outright banned from my childhood home? It hurt more than I expected. "I'm so sorry, sweet pea," Dad continued, his voice cracking. "I want you to know, I don't agree with any of this. I know you're innocent. I've tried talking to them, but—" "It's okay, Dad," I said, even though it wasn't. "You don't have to choose sides." But apparently, he already had. Over the next few weeks, I heard from him regularly. He and Linda were fighting constantly. She couldn't understand why he wouldn't condemn me, why he insisted on maintaining a relationship with his troublemaker daughter. It all came to a head about a month after the party incident. Dad called, sounding more resolved than I'd heard him in years. "I'm divorcing Linda," he said without preamble. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I won't choose between my daughters, and I won't live with someone who asks me to." I felt a mix of guilt and relief. "Dad, you don't have to do this. I don't want to break up your marriage." "You're not," he assured me. "This has been coming for a long time." Emily's accusations were just the last straw. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The constant drama, the accusations, the family strife, it all seemed so pointless, so destructive. And for what? I made a decision then. I called Dad back. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I've been thinking. I don't want to have any contact with Emily anymore. Or Linda. I can't keep doing this." There was a long pause. Then, "I understand, honey. I really do. You have to take care of yourself." His support gave me the courage to take the next step. The following day, I contacted a lawyer and filed for a restraining order against Emily. It felt extreme, but after everything that had happened, I knew it was necessary. To my relief, the judge granted the order. Emily couldn't come near me, my home, or my businesses. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Afterwards, as Jake and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. "I should have done this years ago," I said softly. "Set boundaries, I mean. Maybe things wouldn't have gotten so out of hand." Jake squeezed my hand. "You can't change the past. But you're taking control of your future, that's what matters." I nodded, leaning into him. "You know, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we revisited the idea of adoption. We have so much love to give, Jake. Why not share it with a child who needs it?" As we sat there, planning our future, I felt truly hopeful for the first time in ages. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, dealing with my fractured family, starting the adoption process, but I knew with Jake by my side, I could handle anything. Life had thrown me plenty of curveballs, but I was still standing. My business was thriving, I had a loving husband, and now, the possibility of a child to call our own. Emily and her drama no longer had the power to overshadow all the good in my life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a silent promise to myself. No more letting others dictate my worth. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. From now on, I would stand tall, proud of who I am and what I've accomplished. After all, family isn't just about blood. It's about love, support, and understanding. And looking at Jake, thinking about our future child, I knew I had all the family I needed right here. Isabella Martinez, that's my name. I never knew my dad, but honestly, I didn't feel like I was missing out on much. Mom worked her ass off to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. From as early as I can remember, I was helping around the house. Dishes, laundry, you name it. Mom always said, "Bella, you gotta learn to take care of yourself. The world ain't gonna do it for you." Those words stuck with me. Our apartment was small, but it was home. The sound of Mom's ancient sewing machine was the soundtrack to my childhood. She'd stay up late, mending clothes for extra cash. I'd often fall asleep to its rhythmic hum. What did I like? Computers. It started when our school got a bunch of donated PCs. Most kids used them for games, but I was fascinated by what made them tick. I'd stay after school, tinkering, learning. One day, Mr. Johnson, the IT teacher, caught me trying to install some video editing software. "What are you up to, Isabella?" he asked, eyebrow raised. I froze, thinking I was in trouble. "I just wanted to learn how to edit videos." Instead of getting mad, he smiled. "Well, why didn't you say so? Let me show you a few tricks." From then on, every Tuesday and Thursday after school, Mr. Johnson would teach me the ins and outs of video editing. At home, I'd practice on our old, wheezing computer. As high school graduation approached, reality hit hard. College wasn't in the cards for me. The day after graduation, I marched into WKLP, our local TV station. The receptionist looked at me like I was crazy when I asked about job openings, but pointed me towards the HR office. 3 interviews and 1 practical test later, I had my first real job. Assistant video editor. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. For the next 2 years, I worked my ass off. Weekdays at the station, weekends doing freelance gigs. Every penny I could spare went into my college fund. It was exhausting, but I was determined. Then, on a rare night out with Lisa and Carlos, everything changed. We were at this house party, some friend of a friend thing. That's where I met him, Ryan Thompson. He wasn't what you'd call classically handsome. Kinda nerdy, with thick-rimmed glasses and a slightly crooked smile. But when he started talking about his work in software development, his whole face lit up. I was intrigued. As the party wound down, Ryan asked for my number. I hesitated for a second, then thought, what the hell, and gave it to him. The next few months were like a whirlwind. Ryan and I started dating, and it was nice. Different from what I expected, but in a good way. One night, as we were walking home from a movie, Ryan proposed to me, and I agreed. The wedding was small but beautiful. My mom cried happy tears, and Ryan's parents, Linda and Robert, well, they surprised me. I'd been nervous about meeting them, given the whole wealthy family thing. But they were warm and welcoming from the start. The first 2 years of our marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We had our own place, a cozy apartment not far from the TV station where I still worked. Ryan had his job at some big tech firm, and things were comfortable. We traveled a bit, mostly weekend trips around the country. It was more than I'd ever done growing up, and I loved every minute of it. Seeing new places, trying new foods, it was like a whole new world had opened up to me. But then, things started to change. It started with the little things. Ryan would sigh when I talked about work, or roll his eyes when I got excited about a new editing technique I'd learned. Then more. The first time he made an excuse not to take me to a work party, I didn't think much of it. "It's just a boring office thing," he said. "You wouldn't enjoy it." But then it happened again and again. One night, I overheard him on the phone with a coworker. "Yeah, just me tonight. You know how it is. Bella's not really into these kinds of events." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not into these events? He'd never even given me a chance. That night, I confronted him. "Ryan, why don't you want me to come to your work events anymore? So you're ashamed of me?" "No, it's not that. It's just, sometimes it's hard for you to keep up with the conversations, you know? I don't want you to feel out of place." His words stung, but a part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I did need to step up my game. So, I made a decision. I was going to go back to school. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college, studying information technology. It was tough, balancing work and school and my marriage, but I was determined to make it work. But even as I worked my ass off to improve myself, things with Ryan kept getting worse. The cold shoulder turned into open contempt. The man I married seemed to be disappearing before my eyes, replaced by someone I barely recognized. And then came the night that changed everything. I'd just gotten home from a late class, exhausted but feeling good about acing a test. Ryan was in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Where have you been?" he demanded. Class, remember? I told you I had a big test tonight. He scoffed. You're a fool and a hillbilly, Bella. And no amount of schooling is going to change that. I felt like I'd been slapped. But before I could respond, I heard a gasp from the doorway. Linda and Robert was standing there, a look of horror on their faces. Linda leaned forward, her eyes flashing. How dare you talk to your wife like that? Ryan, we raised you better than this. You don't understand, Ryan said, his voice rising. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a wife who can't even keep up with basic conversations at work events? I flinched, but Robert's next words shocked us all into silence. Embarrassing? He thundered. Let me tell you about embarrassing, boy. Your grandfather, my father, didn't have a lick of formal education. He was born in the poorest part of town, worked his fingers to the bone to give me a better life. So don't you dare sit there and act like you're some kind of aristocrat. I felt a rush of warmth towards my in-laws, but Ryan's next words froze it in its tracks. I'll behave how I see fit, he spat. This is my life, my marriage. After his parents left, Ryan started going away more often. Weekend trips with friends, he'd say, not even bothering to invite me anymore. I threw myself into work and school, taking on extra weekend gigs to fill the lonely hours. Then, my mom got sick. Cancer, the doctors said. It was aggressive, and within months, she was gone. I felt lost, adrift without my anchor. Ryan was barely there, offering awkward pats on the back instead of the comfort I craved. In my grief, I found myself turning to Linda more and more. She'd call to check on me, invite me over for tea, just sit and talk with me for hours. It was the motherly comfort I desperately needed. But this only seemed to infuriate Ryan more. One night, after I'd spent the afternoon at his parents' house, he exploded. Why are you always over there? He yelled. Are you trying to turn my parents against me? I was stunned. What? No, Ryan. I needed someone to talk to. I went to bed that night with tears in my eyes, wondering how things had gone so wrong. A few weeks later, I started feeling off. Exhausted all the time, nauseous in the mornings. At first, I chalked it up to stress and grief. But as the symptoms persisted, a different possibility started to form in my mind. I bought a pregnancy test on my way home from work one day, my heart pounding as I waited for the results. When those two lines appeared, I felt a mix of joy and terror. A baby. We were having a baby. That night, I waited nervously for Ryan to come home. When he finally walked through the door, I took a deep breath. Ryan, we need to talk. I'm pregnant. The look on his face wasn't joy, or even surprise. It was pure fury. Pregnant? He spat. Are you kidding me? We can't have a baby now. Get an abortion, Bella. That's final. I fled the apartment, tears streaming down my face. Without thinking, I found myself at Linda and Robert's doorstep. When Linda opened the door and saw my face, she immediately pulled me into a hug. Through my sobs, I told them everything. About the pregnancy, about Ryan's reaction. I've never seen Robert look so angry, or Linda so determined. You listen to me, Isabella, Linda said, holding my face in her hands. This is your decision. If you want this baby, we'll support you every step of the way. Ryan be damned. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, work, and growing tension at home. Ryan barely spoke to me, spending most of his time out with friends. I focused on my job, squirreling away every extra penny I could for the baby. One afternoon, I had a doctor's appointment to get some routine tests done. I'd taken half a day off work and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home afterward. As I pulled into our apartment complex, I noticed Ryan's car in the parking lot. Strange, he was usually at work at this hour. I climbed the stairs to our apartment, fumbling with my keys. As I opened the door, I heard Ryan's voice. I'll be there in a minute, babe. Just grabbing my overnight bag. My heart started racing. I stepped inside, and there was Ryan, packing a suitcase. Who were you talking to? Where are you going? Before he could answer, I heard a car horn honk outside. Ryan cursed under his breath and grabbed his bag. I don't have time for this. We'll talk when I get back. I followed him down to the parking lot, demanding answers. And that's when I saw her. Sitting in the passenger seat of Ryan's car was a woman. She was beautiful, with long blonde hair and perfect makeup. And she was very, very pregnant. As I stood there, frozen in shock, she got out of the car. She walked towards me with a smug smile on her face. So, you must be Isabella, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I'm Melissa, Ryan's girlfriend. I turned to Ryan, who couldn't even meet my eyes. Is this true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, still not looking at me. I felt a surge of anger and disgust. Aren't you ashamed? I asked Melissa, my voice shaking. He's married. We're having a baby too. Melissa's smile turned cold. Ashamed? No, honey, I had to fight for my happiness, and you've already lost this battle. It's not my fault you couldn't keep your man satisfied. I turned to Ryan, fury replacing my shock. How could you do this? To me, to our baby? He finally looked at me, his face a mask of indifference. Come on, Bella, we both know this marriage was a mistake. I never loved you. You were convenient. A good housekeeper, someone to keep the bed warm. But Melissa, she's my soulmate. She's smart, educated. She fits into my world. Each word was like a knife in my heart. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, as Ryan got into the car with Melissa. I'll be back on Monday to get the rest of my things, he said. We can talk about the divorce then. As they drove away, I sank to my knees in the parking lot, my world crumbling around me. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and dialed Linda's number. When they arrived at my apartment that night, Linda took one look at my tear-stained face and pulled me into a fierce hug. I listened, numb, as Robert berated Ryan over the speakerphone. His words were sharp, cutting. How dare you treat your wife this way, he thundered. The woman carrying your child. Ryan's voice came through, defensive and cold. Dad, you don't understand. Melissa is. Don't you dare mention that woman's name. Linda cut in. We will never accept her, do you hear me? Never. There was a pause, then Ryan's voice, eerily calm. Fine, I don't need your acceptance. I don't need you at all, I have Melissa now, and that's all I need. The next few months were a whirlwind. With Linda and Robert's help, I found a small apartment closer to them. The divorce proceedings were ugly, with Ryan fighting me every step of the way. But in the end, it was done. I was free of him, at least legally. When my daughter, Sophia, was born on a crisp autumn morning, it was Linda who held my hand through the labor. Robert paced the waiting room, every bit the nervous grandfather. Ryan refused to even see Sophia. When I took him to court for child support, he had the audacity to demand a paternity test. I agreed, knowing the truth. The results came back, confirming what I already knew, Sophia was his. The court ordered him to pay alimony, but I knew better than to count on his support. The years that followed were challenging, but also filled with unexpected joy. I threw myself into my studies, finally earning my degree in information technology. At work, my dedication paid off with a promotion to senior editor. But the real blessings were Linda and Robert. They embraced their role as grandparents with a fervor that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Weekends were filled with trips to the park, family dinners, and impromptu movie nights. They were the family I'd always dreamed of, and Sophia adored them. 5 years flew by in a blur of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and proud moments. Sophia was growing into a smart, kind little girl, with her grandmother's smile and her grandfather's curiosity. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, everything changed again. Robert collapsed at home. The diagnosis was grim, advanced pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him months, maybe weeks. I threw myself into helping Linda care for him. Work, Sophia, my own needs, everything took a back seat. Robert had been more of a father to me than my own had ever been, and I was determined to be there for him until the end. Despite our best efforts, despite the treatments and the prayers, Robert slipped away from us 3 months later. I held Linda as she wept, feeling as though I'd lost my own father. At the funeral, I stood between Linda and Sophia, our hands linked. Ryan didn't show up. I hadn't really expected him to, but his absence was a stark reminder of how far he'd fallen. As the weeks passed, Linda's health began to decline rapidly. The loss of Robert seemed to have drained her will to live. She became frail, often confused, and prone to long bouts of silence. The solution came to me that night as I lay awake, worrying. The next morning, I called my boss and arranged to work remotely. Then I packed up Sophia and our essentials and moved into Linda's house. Our new routine took some adjusting. I hired a nurse to care for Linda during the mornings while I worked on my video editing projects. In the afternoons, Sophia and I would take over. We'd read to Linda, help her with her physical therapy exercises, or simply sit and reminisce about happier times. Weeks turned into months. Linda had good days and bad days. On the good days, we'd sit in the garden, enjoying the sunshine and each other's company. On the bad days, I'd hold her hand as she cried for Robert, for the son she'd lost long before his father's death. One sunny afternoon, Sophia and I returned from a walk to find a man in a crisp business suit leaving the house. My heart raced, fearing the worst. "Linda?" I called out as we entered. "Is everything okay?" She was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking tired but composed. "Everything's fine, dear. That was just Mr. Harrison, my lawyer. I needed to discuss some legal matters with him." I nodded, not pressing for details. If Linda wanted to share, she would. "All right, how about some tea?" 3 weeks later, Linda passed away in her sleep. With shaking hands, I dialed Ryan's number. When he answered, I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Ryan, it's Isabella. Your mother passed away this morning." There was a long pause, then Ryan's voice, cold and detached. "Well, I can't say I'm surprised or particularly upset. That woman made her choices. Look, I'm not coming to the funeral. Just let me know when the will reading is scheduled." On the day of the funeral, the church was packed. Linda had touched so many lives, and it showed. As I stood at the pulpit to deliver the eulogy, with Sophia holding my hand, I looked out at the sea of faces. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, all there to say goodbye to a woman who had loved so fiercely and been loved in return. Ryan's absence was a palpable void, a reminder of the tragedy that had torn this family apart. But as I began to speak, sharing memories of Linda's kindness, her strength, her unwavering love, I realized something profound. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about choice. And Linda had chosen to love me, to love Sophia, even when her own son had turned his back on us all. As we laid Linda to rest beside Robert, I made a silent promise. I would honor her memory by living with the same love and grace she had shown me. And I would make sure Sophia grew up knowing the incredible grandparents she had been blessed with, even if their time together had been all too brief. A few days after we laid Linda to rest, I received a call from Mr. Harrison, Linda's lawyer. "Mrs. Thompson, it's time to read the will. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I've already contacted Mr. Thompson. He'll be there." The next morning, I arrived at the law office, my stomach in knots. I took a deep breath and walked in. Ryan was there with Melissa, both dressed expensively and wearing matching scowls. Melissa's eyes raked over me, her lip curling in disdain. "Let's begin," Mr. Harrison said, opening a folder. As he read, I watched Ryan's face. At first, he looked bored, then confused, and finally, as realization dawned, furious. "This can't be right," he interrupted. "Read it again." Mr. Harrison sighed. "Mr. Thompson, it's quite clear. Your mother has left all her property, including the house, to Isabella Thompson and her daughter, Sophia. Ryan rounded on me. He snarled. You manipulated my mother, you gold-digging scum. Well, enjoy it while you can. I'm kicking you out of that house today. As they stormed out, Melissa paused at the door. You might have won this round, she hissed, but trust me, we're not done. I sat there, shell-shocked, as Mr. Harrison explained the details of the will. It wasn't just the house. Linda had left everything to Sophia and me, her savings, her investments, everything. She wanted to ensure you and Sophia would be taken care of, Mr. Harrison said gently. Linda loved you both very much. Tears welled up in my eyes. Even after she was gone, Linda was still looking out for us. But Ryan was true to his word. The harassment started that very night, incessant phone calls, threats, promises to destroy me. I changed my number, but it didn't stop. Then came the intimidation. Men would approach us on the street, making vague threats about paying what we owed. Sophia was terrified, clinging to me whenever we left the house. One day, as a man was making his usual threats, I discreetly hit record on my phone. As soon as he left, I went straight to the police station. The investigation moved quickly. With my recording and testimony, along with statements from neighbors who had witnessed the harassment, the police built a solid case against Ryan. When confronted with the evidence, Ryan's hired thugs quickly turned on him, confirming he had paid them to scare us. I'll never forget the look on Ryan's face when the officer slapped the handcuffs on him. In the end, I was granted a restraining order against Ryan. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Sophia or me, or to contact us in any way. That night, as I tucked Sophia into bed, I looked around the room that had once been Linda's sewing room. Now it was filled with stuffed animals and children's books, a testament to the new life we were building. Grandma and Grandpa are watching over us, Sophia mumbled sleepily, clutching the teddy bear Robert had given her on her 3rd birthday. Yes, they are, I whispered, kissing her forehead. And they'd be so proud of you, my brave girl. Life had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm. Sophia was thriving in school, and I had recently been promoted to deputy director at the TV station. Linda and Robert's legacy had given us security, but I was determined to build our own success. One sunny afternoon, as I left work, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a parked car. Melissa, Ryan's wife, looked nothing like the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. Isabella, please, she said, her voice breaking. I need your help. I tensed, ready for another confrontation, but her next words caught me off guard. Our son is sick. He needs surgery. Please, we need money. Just half of the inheritance. You don't need it all, do you? Something felt off. What's wrong with him? I asked cautiously. Melissa's eyes darted around. It's his heart. No, his kidneys. The doctors say. As she fumbled through her explanation, I remembered our first encounter, her smug smile as she declared victory in our battle. A cold clarity washed over me. You know, Melissa, I said calmly, someone once told me that I had to fight for my happiness. And it looks like you've already lost this battle. Her face transformed, the mask of desperation replaced by fury. You scum, she spat. You owe us that money. It should have been ours. I stood my ground. I don't owe you anything. Now leave, or I'm calling the police. As I walked away, her curses fading behind me, I felt a sense of closure. The last tie to my old life had been severed. That night, I made a decision. It was time for a fresh start. I sold Linda's house and bought a new one in a different neighborhood. Somewhere Ryan and Melissa wouldn't find us. Now, as I sit in our new living room, watching Sophia do her homework, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for Linda and Robert, who loved us unconditionally. Gratitude for the strength I found within myself. And yes, even gratitude for the hardships that led me here,